the Mayor of the City of Clarence, Councillor Brendan Blomley.
Hello, welcome all. Before proceeding, I pay my respects to the Murrumbidgee people as the traditional and original custodians of the lands on which we meet, and I acknowledge the continuing connection of the Tasmanian Aboriginal people to the skies, land and waterways. I pay respect to elders past and present. Before we commence with tonight's council meeting, please let us all pause for a quiet moment of reflection and respect. Thank you, councillors. Please be seated. Well, good evening and welcome to the Clarence City Council meeting of Monday, the 11th of December 2023. This meeting is being broadcast live on YouTube, and what is said in this meeting this evening is not protected by privilege, and there is a link to the agenda papers on Council's website. As colleagues would appreciate, this is the last council meeting of the year, and as there are a number of matters with heightened community interest that will be considered this evening, it may very well be a lengthy meeting. In fact, with our agenda pack and associated documents in excess of 900 pages, it is my intention, for the comfort of our audience, both here and at home, as well as for councillors and our officers, that there will be at least one 10-minute break to allow us all to stretch our legs at about the 10 o'clock mark this evening. Moving on to item number 2, apologies. There's full house this evening, so there are none. Item number 3, declarations of interest of councillors or close associate. Are there any declarations from councillors? Thank you, there being none. We now move into our omnibus items. First one being 4.1, confirmation of the minutes. And the motion is that the minutes of the council meeting held on the 20th of November 2023 have been circulated. Are there any matters arising? There being none, we move now on to 4.2 and 4.2.1, Mayor's diary entries. Excuse me. So diary entries for myself from the 22nd of November through to the 11th of December, as well as the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Ritchie, Councillor Bree Hunter and Councillor Wendy Kennedy on my behalf have been circulated for the interests of councillors. Move now on to 4.2, documents for tabling. And I'd like to table a letter from Breast Screen Tasmania, for hosting the mobile screening unit Luna at Rosny Park between the 2nd of October and the 24th of November this year. That's a thank you letter, and I'll table that as well. Thank you, CEO. Also, I have an email from Miss Sophie Harris, the owner of Cabbage's Flower Shop in Bellerive, regarding the recent works at Percy Street. And Ms Harris writes, "Hi Brendan, I hope you're well. I just wanted to drop a quick line and thank you for the work you did back in 2020, helping us to petition for the new pedestrian crossing in Bellerive Village. I know you and the council have received a bit of backlash from other businesses in the area, but myself, my team and other businesses in the area are really excited at the changes nearing completion. Personally, I am seeing an increase in sales, and I think with the new intersection works, it will certainly see more people moving about the area. Kind regards, Sophie." And as always, Clarence City Council appreciates feedback, and we thank Ms Harris for her positive endorsement of the works at Bellerive. I know that Mr Graham and his team have been pulling out all stops to complete the works as soon as possible, so I table that correspondence as well. Also, I table a letter from Mr Grant O'Brien, the chair of the Tasmanian Football Club AFL Limited, and Mr O'Brien writes, "Dear Mayor Blomley, I wanted to reach out to you on behalf of our club and ask for your support in recommending that our proposed training administration facility be established in the Rosny precinct, incorporating ovals at Charles M Park and Rosny Parklands. The training administration facility is an incredibly important investment in our club. It will be the home of the teams, men and women, boys and girls. It will also be a community asset for the whole state, based in the city of Clarence. Sport is an important ingredient in cohesive communities. It provides purpose, support and encouragement for people to be active and involved. We believe that a key purpose of our club is to provide a vehicle that will encourage participation, not just in our club and not just in AFL, but in sport at its many levels and forms. This facility will be truly world class It will sit in the top quartile of these sorts of facilities around the world. We are incredibly excited about having such an asset in Tasmania and available to Tasmanians. I've attached a short PowerPoint presentation that gives a summary of the facility's key elements for your information. Finally, I'd like to thank you for your consideration, cooperation and leadership as we work with Council to bring this opportunity to reality. So I table Mr O'Brien's letter and I thank him and all directors of the Tasmanian AFL Football Board for their positive and professional engagement with Council, and I also table a copy of the PowerPoint presentation. Thank you, CEO. Finally, colleagues, and by no means least, I would like to acknowledge the outstanding community event yesterday that was the Richmond Bicentenary launch. I'm sure we can all agree that Richmond is an adored town of our region, and as I often say, it is the jewel in Clarence's crown. Whether it be the iconic bridge, heritage streetscape, traditional country fair, or the extraordinary natural surrounds, Richmond is a significantly important part of our city. To be part of yesterday's significant community celebration, to join with many thousands of Clarence residents, along with my colleagues, the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Ritchie, Councillor Goyne, Councillor Chong, Councillor Kennedy and Councillor Hunter, it was truly an honour that Council was able to support and participate in such an incredibly unique event in our region. I would like to take a moment to publicly thank Her Excellency the Governor, the Honourable Barbara Baker AC, for officially opening the celebrations. I'd also like to take this opportunity to give special thanks to the Richmond Bicentenary Planning Committee, particularly the Creative Director, Professor Noel Frankham, and the Chair, our very own Councillor Heather Chong. Together with many other talented volunteers, Professor Frankham and Councillor Chong have worked tirelessly over many months, I believe probably years, to bring together such an extensive program that draws focus on our local heritage. Between now and March next year, over 5 weekends, locals and visitors will gain a rare insight into the complex and remarkable history of our very special village, Richmond. To Council's Arts and Events team, thank you. Ms Coburn, as always, you and your team have gone above and beyond to deliver another quality event for our city, and for that, on behalf of a very grateful city, please pass on our appreciation to your very hard-working team. Now move on to item 4.3, Council workshops, as listed in the agenda. Council, item 4.4, tabling of petitions. CEO, are there any petitions?
No, Mayor.
Thank you. Moving now on to reports from outside bodies. 4.5, the Copping Refuse Disposal Site Joint Authority. Councillor Walker, I note attachment 1 is provided in the agenda papers, and with a quarterly report for the period ending the 30th September in the closed meeting. Is there anything else you'd like to add at this time?
I'm not sure about any other further papers to table at this time.
All right, thank you. We'll move on then to the Southern Tasmanian Regional Waste Authority. Councillor Warren, are you in a position to table the interim inaugural report?
No, not.
No. Okay. Any comments you'd like to make at all, Councillor Warren? Okay, thank you. Moving now on to Taswater Corporation, and as indicated at our last meeting, I attended the general meeting in Launceston on the 22nd of November, and I table a copy of the minutes, the draft minutes rather, that have been approved by the Chief Finance Representative for circulation, noting that these won't be approved until the next meeting in June of next year. I also table a copy of the PowerPoint presentation that was made at that meeting. In regards to the Greater Hobart Committee, due to a bereavement in the Premier's family, our scheduled Friday the 1st of December meeting was postponed to next year for a date yet to be determined. I can report that I attended the Greater Hobart Mayor's Forum last Wednesday, the 6th of December, where amongst other matters we discussed the Hobart City deal and the Derwent Ferry expansion project. Colleagues, are there any other reports from Council and special committees and other representative bodies? Councillor Chong.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I table the Community Wellbeing Advisory Committee meetings from October and also the Cycling South minutes from September.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I table the minutes of the Active Living Committee meeting held on 15th of August 2023.
Thank you very much. There being no other matters, now move on to 4.5, the weekly briefing reports. I note the weekly briefing reports of the 20th and 27th of November and the 4th of December 2023 have been circulated to councillors. Are there any matters arising? Councillor James.
Thank you. I refer to the works on Cambridge Road and Percy Street, Belrive.
So which briefing
And that
report are you
is on
referring
the 27th of November.
to? Thank you.
And it's on page 2.
Thank you.
I refer to the report from Mr. Graham, and may I say before I ask the question, I would like to add that this council has done a sterling job, Mr. Mayor, in actually getting those works underway, and it's a full credit to this council by the very nature of having to deal not only with cabbages but also with a couple of other businesses in that area which have gone through a lot of concern regarding the downturn in their businesses, and also in relation to when the works would be completed. The memo, first paragraph of the memo, is to update councillors of an unavoidable delay to the works in Cambridge Road and Percy Street. So my question is to Mr. Graham, as the appropriate officer. Mr. Graham, the word unavoidable delay to the works in Cambridge Road and Percy Street, Belrive, what was the nature of that? Because we had been advised, and so had a couple of the business people in there, that the works would be completed before December. And it is noted in here that a couple of the businesses did require and did ask for additional crews to be actually brought in to meet the timeline of the end of November. So could Mr. Graham please clarify of the unavoidable delay to the works in Cambridge Road and Percy Street, and also as to whether or not there is any matters that may be needed to brought to this council in relation to some of those businesses that have been adversely affected by the delay in these road works.
Thank you, Councillor James. Mr. Graham, are you in a position to provide an answer, please?
There's multiple questions there through Mr. Mayor, but in terms of the unavoidable delay, they were hit by there was soft soils in one area which they didn't realise at the time or beforehand. There was high demand for asphalt from the Bridgewater Bridge project and the Hobart Airport project, so they were unable to get asphalt. The one-way road was reopened on Saturday, and all works are scheduled to be completed this Friday.
Thank you, Mr. Graham.
And
Councillor James?
I did refer, to the matter of two of the businesses that have been adversely affected as to whether or not there is going to be any follow-up in relation to their requests regarding the delays in the opening of the road.
Thank you, Councillor James. So, would you like to take that one, please? Maybe on
I might
notice.
defer to Mr. Graham.
All right, Mr. Graham, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, any businesses which have caused issues with their business, we've asked to actually put that in writing through to the CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Graham. Thank you, Councillor James. Any other matters arising from the weekly briefing reports? Thank you, Councillor Hunter.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question in relation to the weekly briefing report dated December 4th, particularly on page 2 and 3 in relation to the bylaws, particularly the land drainage issues, the storage and refuse containers and disposal of refuse. It's noted in here that they're not deemed relevant. From my point of view, I think it's better to retain them just so council still has the authority in case. What's the avenue for elected members if we'd still like to see them retained?
Thank you, Councillor Hunter. CEO, please.
Thank you. As I recall, the briefing note that we sent out advised that bylaws automatically expire after 10 years. So there would need to be a review of those bylaws, and then that would need to be workshopped with councillors and then brought into a council meeting for a decision. That would require public consultation as well, so it's a multi-step process. Our advice essentially was that with changes in legislation, there's no longer a need for those bylaws because the legislation provides a better package of reform and enforcement. But we'd be more than happy to take you through that so that you can have some comfort in terms of how the legislation is now working as opposed to how the bylaw would have worked, which we haven't had to rely on for quite a few years.
Thank you, Councillor Hunter. Any other matters arising from colleagues? There being none, move now on to, well, I know we're at the end of our omnibus items. May I have a thank you. Movers, Councillor Kennedy, seconded Councillor Chong. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Moving now to item number 5, which is public question time. I note there is one on notice, Mr Bradley Walker of Howrah, as listed in the agenda. So we move to 5.2, answers to questions on notice. CEO?
Thank you, Mayor. I might defer that answer to Mr Graham, who drafted the response.
Mr Graham.
Through Mr Mayor, the question from Mr Walker of Howrah was between bus stops 30 and 31 on Duntroon Drive, Rugby, many children cross the section of road on school days, mornings and afternoons, yet there is no crossing or traffic calming measures in place and the signage is quite old and in poor condition. There is a high level of concern that with traffic often passing at high speeds, it's only a matter of time before a serious incident happens at this location. Is the Council able to do a report to see what could be done to create a safer crossing for our children? And our answer is Council engineers are planning to include a pedestrian crossing island near bus stop 31 on Duntroon Drive between Hookey Street and Duntroon Place as a funding request for consideration in the 24-25 roads capital budget. In the meantime, Council officers will undertake a review of the existing signage in the area to confirm it is still in a serviceable condition and meets contemporary signage standards.
Thank you, Mr Graham. Moving to 5.3, there are no answers to previous questions taken on notice. Move to 5.4, questions without notice. Are there any questions from the gallery? Mr Figg, good evening. I think you know the drill, sir.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. My name is Michael Figg, Lauderdale. I'm in the Breakfast tradition and have a preamble, and I'd like to wish...
Please keep it short, Mr Figg.
I'd like to wish all the staff and members of Council a Merry Christmas and hope you enjoy the break as much as we will. Now, back to the question, back to my order. I've noticed in correspondence and in both written and non-written that Central Lauderdale is now being called the Basin, Lauderdale Basin. Can the General Manager explain why that change has been made? Because the ratepayers in Lauderdale are very concerned, knowing that the land is up to 3 metres AHD, so we don't see it as a basin. Could you please explain?
Thank you, Mr Figg. CEO, thank you.
Thank you for the question, Mr Figg. We've referred internally amongst a number of us as to that area as Lauderdale Basin because it does tend to hold a fair bit of water at certain times, and certainly in the last couple of years with El Nino weather, we've certainly seen that. It is formally known as Central Lauderdale, you know, different parts of our city are referred to in different ways. Both are essentially informal names, but for the sake of consistency, we can certainly refer to it as Central Lauderdale.
Thank you, Mr Figg. Are there any other questions from the gallery this evening? There being none, we move now to item number 6, which is deputations by members of the public. And members of the public making deputation reminded that they are limited to 3 minutes, and a timer will sound at the end of that time, and I will have to strictly enforce the 3-minute time limit. It's not a goal, it's just say you've got 3 minutes in order to make your deputation. CEO, could you please introduce the deputees?
Thank you, Mayor. We have 5 deputations tonight. The first deputation is from Mr Jamie Vassos in respect to the planning application for 214-216-218 Blessington Street.
Good evening, Mr Mayor and Councillors. So as per the boundary adjustment request that was done for us by Rogerson and Birch, We are after a minor boundary adjustment on the proposed property of 216 to be able to consolidate some land so that my neighbours, Kevin and Michelle, and my wife and our little one have some extra garden space and green space, because there was a proposed dwelling, which you'll note in the papers below, that would have impacted our sunlight and also our view over the Derwent, which is why we choose to live where we do, part of. As far as we're aware, as per Craig Rogerson, our surveyor, the only discrepancy is that there is a bit of a crack in the planning scheme, if you like, where it sort of slips through as not being considered minor, and the planning authority is considering it major due to a discrepancy as to whether or not it is minor or major. So Craig advised us to push forward and see if we could maybe get it overturned, and your help in the matter would be greatly appreciated. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr Versos. CEO.
Thank you. Our second deputation tonight is from Dr Warwick Bishop regarding the planning application for 128 Bichonneau Street.
Okay, Dr Bishop.
Mayor, Deputy Mayor and councillors, thank you for the opportunity to speak. Having got the documents recently, I see that the planning approval process would support this application, which means I only need to speak briefly to the representations, which the documentation would suggest don't really create any major issues. I'd like to take a moment to just clarify one point, which is the proposal document which suggested there was going to be accommodation for 6 people. It's actually going to be limited to 4 people, and I've put in there in my application 365 days of the year. Of course, that's not the case. And the reason why that's not the case is that we plan to continue to use the house on a regular basis as a beachside sort of retreat from the city. And in fact, that is important in context of short stay accommodation, which has a bit of a bad rap on the other side of the river. In no way would this property be drawing from the local sort of stock of accommodation, as we would have been holding on to it anyway. And appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr Bishop. CEO.
Thank you. Our third deputation tonight is from Ms Virginia Mendoza regarding the Skylands Master Plan.
Good evening, Ms Mendoza.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. So I am Virginia Mendoza née Carr of Merlinston in Victoria, and I represent one of the 4 families who own the land on Drury Point Peninsula for which Skylands Master Plan is proposed. So the Master Plan is a sustainable design grounded in proven urban planning principles tailored to the local context. It envisions walkable neighbourhoods linked by greenway corridors, seamlessly integrating housing, commercial areas and community services. Helping address Hobart's housing shortage, the plan includes low-income housing and a much-needed diversity of dwelling types. Emphasising a pedestrian-friendly approach, it deviates from conventional car-centric suburban layouts, presenting a contemporary design that consciously avoids urban sprawl. Crucially, the master plan is co-designed through collaboration with diverse community stakeholder groups, and recent workshops have addressed Council's concerns regarding density, neighbourhood staging, education demand, road networks, street details and public ferry transport development. These are all incorporated into the revised master plan. I'd particularly like to note that we're committed to continuous community engagement and collaboration with Council and recognise the importance of making ongoing improvements as the plan develops. And on a personal note, as a parent of young children, I think Skylands will offer a great life for families. Its walking to school will be safe and easy, and everything you need will be accessible by foot or bike, including parks and cafes, all within your local neighbourhood. This convenience is especially beneficial for the increasing number of people working from home. If you do commute, or like many of us, a mixture of both, Hobart by ferry will be a convenient option. And I think the benefits of this in alleviating pressure on the road and bus network align well with the recent draft River Derwent Ferry Services Master Plan. I'm particularly excited about plans to regenerate native vegetation, bringing back Indigenous flora and fauna, creating unique open public spaces. Thank you for your time, and we appreciate the Council and the community's dedicated efforts in shaping the best outcome for this beautiful part of Tasmania.
Thank you, Ms Mendoza. CEO.
Thank you, Mayor. Our fourth speaker tonight is Mr Roger Curtis in relation to the AFL High Performance Centre proposal.
Good evening, Mr Curtis.
Thank you, Mayor and Deputy Mayor and councillors, for the opportunity to speak briefly with you tonight. As councillors, you are no doubt vigilant in searching for major projects your community actually wants. Judging by the, and I quote, exceptionally strong survey response you have before you, you have a proposal that a very strong majority of the people of Clarence actually want. These results are also important because, as is now well understood, the AFL Club Training and Administration Facility with its ovals is a community-facing project. This means that it brings new services and new infrastructure which are open to the public. It is most certainly not a private workplace preserved only for elite athletes. In addition, it will create hundreds of direct and indirect jobs and a critical lasting boost to the local economy. But perhaps even more importantly, this project by its very nature will create new hope and possibilities for generations of young people in the city of Clarence and beyond. It really will. And what about the parklands concept? It is also important. What is before you offers the perfect balance. It does so by integrating a contemporary multi-use training and recreation asset which will actually draw people into the parkland and no doubt provide a safer environment whilst preserving at least 50% of the old golf course. If you are a councillor who is reluctant to sell council land but is happy to lease, doesn't want to alienate council land for private use, doesn't want a $70 million project if council has to contribute vast sums, then this project must have great appeal. If you are a councillor who wants to seize the whole of community benefits enjoyed by every city in Australia which has had the good fortune to have an AFL club call their city home, then I urge you, do not pass up this chance to make your lasting contribution. As one thing can be said with confidence, a chance like this one will never come again.
Thank you, Mr Curtis. CEO.
Thank you, Mayor. Our final speaker tonight is Mr Gary Swain, also in relation to the AFL High Performance Centre.
Good evening, Mr Swain.
Thank you, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, councillors, for the opportunity. I'll be very brief and would support the comments made by Mr Curtis. I'm the Deputy Secretary, Transport and Infrastructure. I'm also chairing the steering committee which will make a recommendation to Minister Street in relation to the TNA site location. In terms of our commitments to the AFL, the broader commitments for the program of AFL work, we do need to get through the site selection process and hit the ground running next year. The main thing I wanted to say today is I just wanted to thank Council for working with us constructively at very short notice through the CEO and Georgia and others in the team. It's been a very professional engagement and very constructive. We know we came along late in the process in terms of the parklands that had been going on for some time. That's an unfortunate working through of the time it took to get an AFL licence agreement, but do very much appreciate the work that's gone into the sites that have been developed. I understand the recommendations that you have in front of you tonight we will need to consider and evaluate what comes forward from council. It's obviously up to council what it puts forward. I'd say they're both very strong proposals in the recommendations, and they are complete proposals in that they cover both the primary and the secondary ovals, so that gives certainty for the evaluation process. So thank you for that. In terms of the scoring process, we can't actually do that to make a recommendation to the Minister till we get a proposal from council or councils. And as I said, you have two strong proposals. If I had to guess, I would say the Rosny Park primary, Charles Hand secondary would be the best foot forward, in the interest of giving you the best information I can to make your decisions. But at the end of the day, we understand that that's a matter for council, and you'll have to judge your views about the other community needs and wants in relation to the land that we're discussing. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Swain. Thank you, Chief Executive Officer. We now move to item number 7, and I advise that Council now intends to act as a planning authority under the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act of 1993. Move on to item number 7.1, a development application for 214, 216, 218 Blessington Street, Southam, a boundary adjustment. I understand there's an alternate motion from Councillor Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move the alternate recommendation for approval in my name and that of Councillor Goyne.
You second that, Councillor Goyne. Thank you. Councillor Kennedy, the floor is
As
yours.
we have a long night ahead of us, I'll be brief. This has been circulated to all colleagues, and I thank many of you for your responses. I also thank Jamie Vassos for his deputation tonight. Now, this is not in any way a reflection on our planning staff who have to navigate their way around the quirks of the planning scheme. This DA is about a boundary adjustment. The advice provided in this motion, as listed, is comprehensive. As for the reasons, the development complies with performance criteria 10.6.1 P1 in that, despite the lots being less than 1,200 metres squared, the performance criteria requires the planning authority to have regard to the relevant matters, and council considers the lot design to meet the objections of the development standard for subdivisions 10.6.1 by reducing the number of lots and thereby reducing the demand for services. 3 lots becoming 2 lots. There's been no representations against this boundary adjustment. It seems like a very sensible solution, and I seek council's support.
Thank you, Councillor Kennedy. Councillor Goyne.
Colleagues, I seek your support as well, and I just wanted to thank Councillor Kennedy for taking me under her wing. I realised when this came to council that I would like to make an amended motion, and it wasn't something that I had done before or been taught to do in my previous iteration of life. So I do really appreciate her stepping me through the process involved in preparing this alternative motion, and for me bringing this common sense approach to this application. So I seek colleague support.
Thank you, Councillor Goyne. Councillor Hume, please.
Thank you, Mayor. This is an interesting one. It's a little quirk in the planning scheme, because if you read the objectives of the use standard 10.6.1, and as Councillor Kennedy says, you know, I say that we can interpret this in a way that the application be approved, but I say so with no reflection on our expert and professional planning staff who do an excellent job in assessing these things. But looking at the objectives, it's obvious that the purpose of the use standard is about making sure that the number of lots and the size of lots is sufficient in a way that it's able to, you know, meet the demand for services and infrastructure that's appropriate for the area. And here we have a case where, under the performance criteria, we've got this reference to an area of a minimum of 1,200 metres squared. But here we have an application where the lot sizes, for whatever historical reason, are smaller, and even though they haven't met the 1,200 metres squared, it's still reducing the demand, reducing the number of lots and improving the situation. But the reason I believe we can approve this is, I note that in the use standard, the headline in the performance criteria says have regard to. So each lot is considered to have sufficient usable area dimensions suitable for the intended use. The planners did note that it met that part of the performance criteria, having regard to. Now, I did a bit of a Google search just to see if I could find a legal definition of having regard to, and the only one I could find was the High Court of the Republic of Ireland defined it as implies looking at the matter concerned and factoring in its relevance and or weight, if any, as those matters appear to the decision maker. So my understanding of that is when you say having regard to, it's in the gift of the decision maker to determine the relevance and weight of those matters, which to me says that you could determine that a matter doesn't have any weight at all. And that's the basis on which I think this application can be approved. Like I said, it meets the objectives of the use standard. I think it meets what I believe was the intent of the drafters of the Tasmanian planning scheme at the time these particular criteria were drafted, and therefore I believe we can approve it.
Thank you, Councillor Hume. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I thank Councillor Kennedy and Councillor Goyne for bringing forward the alternate, and thank Mr Vassos for the representation earlier. As we're aware, it's simply an attempt to reduce 3 titles to 2, and through the planning system requirements, the recommendation for refusal turns on the fact that the proposed lots would be less than the 1,200 metre square size. That doesn't comply with 10.6.1 lot design P1, and as such is discretionary, and it doesn't meet the acceptable solution under the planning scheme. Consequently, the proposal is recommended for refusal on that basis, when in reality, really what we're saying is that the lots continue to remain suboptimal lot sizes within the zone, as these lots are actually would be larger than they exist at the moment. So they're less non-compliant if we approved it, which is a very awkward and unusual situation. All 3 lots are currently 668 metres squared, and as has been evidenced, there are lots very consistent with this size and shape in the area, and there are some others that are bigger. But in short, the owners of the lots were zoned under a previous scheme, and through no fault of their own, are non-compliant under the current scheme. And just a quick query about the maths. It's interesting that the 3 lots separately total 2,004 square metres, yet 2 lots together combined 2,029 metres squared, so I'm not quite sure why they gained some extra space there, but it might be something that I've missed. However, in relation to the alternate motion before us, I feel a little bit reminded of Oliver Twist at the moment, you know, when Mr Bumble's being held responsible for the actions of his wife, and he says that, you know, the law is an ass, and that he hopes that the law will have its eyes opened by experience. And so here we are with a proposal that makes us less non-compliant if we approve it, and so I think this should be one of those times where experience guides the council. And to this point, the issue around the sizing of the lots has been raised already by the Planning Institute of Australia in August 2022, and specifically goes to the definition of the need for minor change under size of lot 7.3.1, and that actually goes into some detail about there needs to be some work around that definition, and I agree. And if that actually takes place, then we actually perhaps wouldn't be here dealing with these sorts of issues. So I hope that government will actually revisit that submission from the Australian Planning Institute from last year, because if they do, then actually this wouldn't need to come before us at all, as I don't think it really should. So for that reason, I'm supporting the alternate motion.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor James.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and it was very interesting to hear the Deputy Mayor's comments in relation to what may or may not be the case in relation to this particular application. And the actual planning staff have recommended this for refusal because the proposal is contrary to the provisions of the Tasmanian Planning Scheme and Clarence for the following reasons. The proposal does not comply with 10.6.1, lot size under the performance criteria P1. And remember, we have to assess the acceptable solutions and then work through the performance criteria. And the staff at this place, in the council staff, have in fact worked through the performance criteria and come up with a recommendation such as this, that because of the proposal does not comply with a particular reference to 10.6.1 lot design P1, because both lots on proposed plan are less than 1,200 metres square in the site area. So what happens here is a separate assessment was undertaken under section 110 adhesion orders of the local government building and miscellaneous provisions of 1993. So we're dealing here with the local provisions of 1993 to ascertain the likely success of adhering the lots under this Act. And I would go on and quote, however, the proposal cannot meet the necessary requirements of an adhesion order under section 1101 because the land is not a full parcel and cannot be adhered. So you can play on words in such a way to what's the intent of this, or what some statute or some provision that may apply in another country, quite foreign to this place, and then we need to assess it in accordance with the planning scheme, which is in place, and it has been in place for some time, and the actual staff in this place have gone through that and have, by the very nature of it, said it does not meet the necessary requirements of an adhesion order, and therefore, because that it's not a full parcel and it cannot be adhered. So it cannot be adhered. And I can understand how these lots are 3 in number and how it would be reduced to 2. But then again, are we to basically take any consideration in relation to what the planning scheme is? And it's been made quite clearly that there was no representations were received. So this council can in fact approve that. Can approve this particular development application, and there's no way in which it could be challenged unless this council decided to challenge its own decision in the tribunal. And that wouldn't happen, would it? Because what decision is made in this place, there's no representations against it, and hence there would be no right of appeal to the tribunal. I understand the concerns of the gentleman who spoke earlier, and it does seem to be a little bit awkward and also unkind in the circumstances. But are we here in this place to adhere to a planning scheme which has gone through quite rigorous procedures in relation to this? Or are we sort of to take on the whim of it, it's sort of in the intent of what it meets and so on? So I will be supporting the officer's recommendation, reluctantly, and I can understand the representative's concerns. But once this place starts to sort of wiggle around a particular statute under certain provisions of the Act and the planning scheme, then really it's open slather. And so anybody who there is no representations received, then we can basically change whatever the recommendation is and vote accordingly.
So, Councillor James, am I to understand that if this alternate motion for approval is unsuccessful, you're foreshadowing the officer's recommendation?
Foreshadow the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Mulder.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Alderman James is exactly right. There is no latitude, there is no room within the planning scheme. This must fail on all counts, bar one. The book of Kells came to mind as Councillor Hume searched far and wide for some dictionary definition to allow him to step around what is absolutely clear. I noticed there wasn't a year given, hence my reference to the Book of Kells. So I take that on board. There was an opportunity to fix this. These aren't just 3 isolated lots stuck in the middle of nowhere that somehow or other don't conform to the present plan scheme. I just did a quick count on the map. There are more than 100 lots that are sub-minimum, and it's not like we're looking at a subdivision to create them. They existed. They existed under a previous planning scheme, right? So over 100 lots, sub-minimum lots. And there was an opportunity during the local planning provisions. Members of reasonable council, of previous council, we spent a good 12 months, if not more, flogging this around this chamber to be simply told on any time we tried to suggest it, the Planning Commission said, no, 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 this is about like for like. Sorry. Why wasn't this particular area rezoned for the like for like? Ah, here we go. The lawyers, and probably the dictionary, will tell you that like for like means like the scheme and like the new scheme. This is actually like the old scheme, but not the new one. It's not like for like, it's like for unlike. So for heaven's sake, let's make some common sense. Now, it's not about legal technicalities and all thing. There is one point here that makes it possible. The planning scheme, the planning legislation specifically provides that where there are no objectors, no community representation, there cannot be an appeal. So in this case, if we use common sense, and as Oscar Wilde said, the problem with common sense is not very common, hopefully it is around this chamber, that we compare. So we go in there and we make this decision that common sense says that when you take 3 sub-minimum lots and turn them into 2 less sub-minimum lots, we'll get the L's in here soon, that is common sense. That is what the thing was designed. And since there isn't a single community representation, the planning law provides that we can make this decision and that it is not appealable, and as far as I'm concerned, it may not conform to the planning scheme, but it conforms to the planning legislation because of that opportunity. So I, for one, will be supporting this, notwithstanding the fact that, it's actually going to be the exception in this area now because it's going to be bigger than all the sub-minimum lots. If that ain't common sense, I never heard it.
Any other colleagues wishing to? Thank you, Councillor Walker.
Yes, look, noting some of the other Irish commentary around here, I'm reminded of former Irish Prime Minister Bertie Ahern, who said if hindsight were foresight, there wouldn't be a problem. And this is where we've ended up. This wasn't anticipated or worked through, and we end up with this ludicrous situation. So the alternate motion, as has been mentioned, makes it less non-congruent, brings it closer to line. And for that reason, if not anything else, I urge colleagues to support the alternate.
Thank you. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? One reply, Councillor Kennedy, thank you.
No, thank you, Mr Mayor, other than to thank colleagues for their contribution, as amusing and interesting as it was. And yes, I love hearing common sense coming back into the chamber every now and then. I thank you and I seek council support.
Wonderful, thank you. Well, colleagues, I put the motion. That is the alternate motion, saying in the name of Councillor Kennedy, seconded by Councillor Goyne. That is that the development application be approved subject to conditions and advice. All those in favour? Those against? So carried. Thank you. Moving now on to 7.2, which is a development application for 112 Backhouse Lane, Cambridge, proposed dwelling retrospective. I understand there's an alternate motion. Thank you, Councillor Hume. Do you have a second to Councillor Hume? Thank you, Councillor Chong. Thank you. We'll share it around tonight. Councillor Hume, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. And once again, as with the previous item, regardless of what some colleagues have said, I do believe, and once again, this doesn't have any representation, so I guess we could provide whatever reason we like, but I do believe that there is also a reason why this particular planning item could be approved according to an interpretation of the planning scheme. I say that once again without any reflection on the professionalism and expertise of our planning staff, who always, as always, do an excellent job. But as with any discretionary application, when it comes to this chamber, it is open to council to take a different view. I'm going to run through some of the performance criteria and some of the observations that the planning staff have made, but provide a alternate view on them. So what we have before is a application for a residential use within an agriculture area, and a lot of this turns on the question of whether the use is necessary in connection with the agricultural use. So looking at performance criteria 21.3.1 P4, now the planners did observe that it is a small scale vineyard and therefore doesn't present a full-time business. Okay, the business may not require full-time work, but it could require someone on full-time standby. And the agronomist report that was provided by the applicant pointed out that to make a small boutique vineyard successful, you do need a wine of distinction, and this requires a greater attention to the crop. The planners also noted that there are other vineyards with residences that had other uses, but they had other uses such as salad or visit accommodation function facilities. Now, it's worth noting that those other uses are not agricultural uses, but if you are going to account them as associated with the agricultural use, you could also extend the same argument to the visitor accommodation on the site, which is subject to this application. I also understand that the visitor accommodation, as part of that business proposition, the vineyard associated with the visitor accommodation actually provides is intended to provide an experience for the visitors in terms of tasting, touring the vineyard, etc. The planners did suggest that the visitor accommodation could have been used to accommodate workers on site. However, the accommodation, to my understanding, is a necessary part of the overall business and already is booked many months in advance. Providing integrated experiences like this is actually important to maximising the economic value that we get out of agricultural land. There was also a note in there about the potential to use alarm systems that are capable of detecting failure of a watering system. But however, when it comes to frost, rectifying the situation could be time critical, and that's another important reason to have someone on site. And it's also noted the objective of the zone is to minimise the conversion of agricultural land. This residential use is actually proposed for an existing building, so in that sense there's no threat to agricultural land by approving this use. So I believe that we can interpret the planning scheme in such a way that this development can be approved, that the agronomist report presented by the applicant along with the expert planners report support the use in connection with the residential use in connection with the agricultural use. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hume. Councillor Chong.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, as an ex-farmer, I entirely understand the need to maintain agricultural land. But I also understand the need to have somebody on site when the frost alarm goes off, because trust me, at 2 o'clock in the morning when it goes off, you want to walk down and make sure that it's working. Because whether your property is 0.67 of a hectare or 32 hectares, that's your income. You need to be there to do these things. So I absolutely support having somebody on site, however big or small an operation is, because it's fundamental to making sure that the value of the crop that you've got there is maintained and you can produce a good crop, however large or small it is. As Councillor Hume has mentioned, there is an existing building on site. It's turning that into a residential site. It's not taking any more land away. It's not fettering the agricultural land in any way, shape or form, but actually should help people make that a good agricultural property. I urge my colleagues' support.
Thank you, Councillor Chong. Councillor Gordon.
Thank you to my colleagues that have already spoken. I would also seek colleagues' support. I'd like to add the fact that the building has been in existence since at least 2016, and that the new owners of the property, not the builder of the actual studio, are just seeking to bring the structure up to code. And so I think that that is something that we should be supporting. It's not like they've, gone and put up a structure and are just hoping to get away with it. I also seek that if he hadn't have brought this to council, they could just be living in the dwelling as it is, without council knowing. And having been a small business owner myself, as Councillor Chong mentioned, sometimes it's actually the little businesses that need the leg up a little bit more. And from someone who struggled for many, many years, I definitely appreciate that. I also, on speaking to the applicant, was not only the frost, and obviously we have, very changing weather, but the importance of being able to attend to any birds that may be stuck, which you may not have an alarm for, or wildlife in the netting as soon as possible. So that for me was definitely an important part. And I will also mention that the applicant does intend on the possibility of opening a cellar door at some later stage. So as our planners had mentioned, the other the other places with dwellings, vineyards with dwellings, was because they have the cellar door, and hopefully, if this business is successful, which I do hope that it is, and I hope that our support helps the business to be successful, hopefully there will be another cellar door opening. So I seek colleague support.
Thank you, Councillor Goyne. Councillor Kennedy, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Very briefly, I'll just take this opportunity to join my fellow farming councillors and say exactly that. If you've lived on a farm, regardless of what size, you need to be on site. And having visited the property with one of my colleagues, it was just a joy to actually see some agricultural activity with a vista of concrete not too far away. What a beautiful oasis it might be in the future. So I will be supporting this.
Thank you, Councillor Kennedy. Councillor Hunter, please.
Thank you. I must say this has been the most interesting planning report since I've been on council. I thoroughly enjoyed reading it, as well as the agronomist report, and I learned a fair bit in doing so. I'm happy to support this alternative motion, and I'd like to thank Councillor Hume for putting it together. I agree. I think in this instance we should be taking the expert advice of the agronomist, who have clearly made those recommendations in their report, rather than the strict adherence to the planning scheme. I'm happy to support.
Thank you, Councillor Hunter. Deputy Mayor, Councillor Ritchie. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I thank Councillor Hume for bringing forward the alternate for consideration. Obviously, as we're all aware, this is simply about an existing studio, I think it's been described, but perhaps in the past might have had a history as a picker's cottage or something like that. I'm not familiar with how long it's been there, or indeed what it was used for in the past, but perhaps something like that. The proposed upgrade, of course, will, as we already know, isn't going to detract from the amount of land able to be used for agricultural purpose, and I think that's the really important part here that we all get. And this is a second opportunity this evening to actually take advantage of the fact that we don't have any representatives in terms of considering the decision that we need to make, and hopefully we get a sensible outcome that acknowledges the efforts that have been made by the applicant to bring this particular dwelling up to code, and should I point out also some of the issues with compliance around building and plumbing were inherited, weren't works done by the applicant, prior to purchase, so trying to correct those things to their credit. I think that the DA before us ticks all the boxes in terms of the principles that underpin the intention of the agricultural zoning of the scheme. So for this reason, I think it's very reasonable to support the alternative.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Councillor Moulton, please.
Thank you. Having quickly referred to the Book of Kells, I think the word around the whole thing here revolves around the word required. Is this thing required to run this particular operation? Now, 40 years ago, when you just went into the bush and stuck some vines in the ground and hoped they'd grow and do those sorts of things and produce some fairly ordinary wines, I might say, what was required was a bit of land, a shovel and a few other bits and pieces, and things were fine. The world's moved on, people. It's now intensive, high-quality agriculture. These particular areas are really required. And if you're going to run a top-notch operation, then the word required is relative to the operation you're running, not to what someone else, with due respect to others, say, you could do if you wanted to do it somewhere differently. And as others have pointed out, this is an existing premises. It doesn't detract from the agricultural land. If you wanted to be serious about the protection of agricultural land, you might have to look about the protection of the water. And when we were there the other day, it was amazing to discover that council's been busy developing further applications, putting in more hardtack, doing my favourite pet thing of shovelling good rainwater down pipes into creeks instead of allowing the aquifer to fill. And while we were there the other day, guess what? Read the agricultural report, you might say, why is a dam on a rivulet require a pumping mechanism? Because guess what? Council's already destroyed the vulnerability of that particular dam, which was a natural watercourse, which was always full and was more than sufficient to do it, but the flow has disappeared. So now what we have to do, we have to go down to Barilla Rivulet and we have to pump the water from the rivulet up to fill up the dam, because we've previously approved all sorts of developments over the top that have made this particular piece of land reduced its agricultural potential, so we have to come up with another source. So, what's required, that irrigation system is required because of previous planning decisions of this council. So here we go. What will we do? Will we just close him down because, there's a picker's hut that's been there for 1,000 odd years that's had unlawful building works committed to it? Had we picked this point up at the time we said bring that building into compliance, I think there might have been the thing. But the encouragement of council, right, who we must admit were looking at something called the building code, not the planning scheme at the time, money was spent bringing this thing up to standard, fixing the plumbing and fixing the drainage. And here we are at the end of the rainbow. We suddenly discover that, sorry, you don't have planning permission. It doesn't fit the conformity of the scheme. Now, we know the staff have to apply the scheme as they see it and as they interpret it and as they have other things. But here we go again. As much as we might like to say we're going to take the people out of the politics out of planning, what we're actually planning to do with the other proposals are to take the people out of planning. Well, here we go again. This is the one opportunity the people have to have a say. And what do they say? Great idea, let's do it, let's agree with them.
Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? Councillor James.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and may I say from the outset that the officer's report on page 59 states, and it's for all that have read it, it says that the planning application for the dwelling at that location be refused because it is contrary to the provisions of the Tasmanian Planning Scheme. And what's important in their reasoning, the proposed residential use fails to demonstrate compliance with clause 21(3)(1)(p)(4) standards in relation to a residential use on land zoned agriculture. May I say that over the years we've had a number of planning schemes And I don't want to go into the history of the Eastern Shore Planning Scheme, the 2007, the 2015, and then subsequently the statewide planning scheme and Clarence provisions that apply in these circumstances. So over the years, this question of zoning agriculture and the residential use on land zone agriculture has been brought across from, to my knowledge, from one planning scheme to the other because it needed to protect the agricultural sort of necessity that is quite relevant to the Coal River Valley and to all those areas, as well as within that Cambridge area as well. So that has been brought and carried forward for a number of reasons, and good reasons, because of what I've just said a moment ago. Also, the planners are saying the proposed residential use is not consistent with the state policy on the protection of agricultural land 2009. And that hasn't changed because over the years the planning scheme obviously has had that reference to it and it's been part and parcel of it. So I'm going to conclude on that comment, but before I do, I'm going to pose a question to our planner. And my question is, if this particular matter did go to the tribunal, would they overturn it based on those particular provisions of the state policy in protection of agricultural land and also the standards in relation to residential use on zone agriculture? Please.
Ms Olsen, thank you.
Through you, Mayor, I would hate to predict what the Commission, oh sorry, not the Commission, the TASCAT, the Tribunal, would say. It could go either way, I guess.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution at this point? There being none, Councillor Hume, right of reply, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, in relation to Councillor James's comments, so we've discussed extensively the performance criteria, and a number of colleagues, and I thank them for their comments, have pointed out why the reasons why this residential use is required in relation to the agricultural use. But just going to the state policy, so there's a sort of a three-part test in the clause in the state policy. One is that the residential use is required as part of the agricultural use. Well, that's the same as the performance criteria. We've already talked about that one. The residential use does not unreasonably convert agricultural land. Well, it's an existing building, so there's no conversion. And does not confine or restrain agricultural use on or in the vicinity of that land. Once again, existing building, no conflict there. So I believe that the development is also consistent with the state policy.
Thank you, Councillor Hume. Colleagues, I'll put the alternate motion, seeing in the name of Councillor Hume, that is that the planning application retrospectively at 112 Backhouse Lane, Cambridge, be approved subject to conditions. All those in favour? Those against? So carried. Thank you. Moving now on to item 7.3, which is development application for 128 Bishno Street, Clifton Beach, change of use of visitor accommodation. Councillor Mulder.
So moved, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Walker. Councillor Mulder.
A competition for seconders. That was good. Here we have what is basically a standard application which had a little bit of a rocky road and due to some very good concerns about inundation and coastal erosion and bits and pieces like that. Now, the first thing to do is to say that a lot of the decisions and discussions are around about in these inundation areas relate to proposals to build new buildings. And you really can't be looking at these things and saying, you know, well, what's the world going to look like in 20 or 30 years? Sorry, you really must be looking at those new applications and say, well, what are we going to do to future-proof this building? In this case, there's a substantial building. It is unlikely to be affected by sea level rise for some considerable time in my life, but the only issue is the accesses to the building, the accesses to the lot, which would be subject to inundation. I think they probably are even in storm surge events. So here you have a situation where there's an existing building that's high and dry, and the accesses to it are the issue in relation to subject to inundation. However, should there be some inundation, the council road that services this property is going to get inundated first. So if we're going to say to this person, no, you can't do anything with this property because of future inundations, we should be really saying it to ourselves. So if we're going to adopt this policy of defend, right, which we really haven't, but what we're saying to it is that we need to do something about our road network that is subject to inundation, and we've been through Mulder's mantra on how to deal with this with inundation. So, having been through that tortuous path, and the planning officers have eventually come to an agreement, we can't do anything more than go along and approve this particular development, because once again that archetypical test as found in the Saxon Chronicles is one of common sense. The only other observation I'd make is I know that there is some reluctance around the question of excess visitor accommodation, and I have often expressed those concerns when you get what is supposed to be an Airbnb, but the house is of sufficient size and with sufficient facilities to actually become an Airbnb hotel resort rather than a dwelling. And then we have the other situations where we have Airbnb stuck in the middle of suburbia, and the residential amenity. But here we have something that meets none of those criteria and is and will always be a family home, and a very nice one, I must say, that I think just the common sense says that the planning officers have reached the right conclusion, and I, for one, am most happy to move this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Mulder. Councillor Walker.
Yes, very little to add. On this matter, I support the officers' updated recommendations, and again, discussions around conversion to visitor accommodation are not always specifically planning matters. They do come sometimes into the planning matters. I'd note this isn't taking anything away from rental stock at all. This is about increased utilisation. So I think you should just take comfort from the officer's updated recommendation.
Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? There being none, there's probably no need for a reply, unless you'd like to, Councillor Mulder.
Now, I will exercise my right
Absolutely.
and bow to your superior wisdom.
Well, I'll put the motion. That is that development application of 128 Bitchno Street, Clifton Beach, change of use to visitor accommodation, be approved, subject to conditions and advice. All those in favour? And that's unanimous. Thank you, colleagues. Moving now on to 7.4, which is a development application for 7 Travaza Crescent, Tranmere. That is that be approved, subject to conditions and advice. I call for a mover. Thank you, Councillor Hume. A seconder. So I thank Councillor Hunter. Thank you, Councillor Hume.
As per the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Hunter.
Nothing to add.
Well, this might be a short one as well. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? There being none, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Thank you very much. Well, I now advise that Council now concludes its deliberations as a planning authority under the Land Use Planning Approvals Act of 1993. Moving on now to item 8 of our agenda. There is nothing at 8.1, 8.2 or 8.3. Move on to 8.4, which is governance. 8.4.1, which is 7 Mile Beach Local Area Plan of 2023 adoption. There's a recommendation before us. I'll call for a mover of the recommendation. Councillor Hunter, thank you. Seconded, Councillor James. Councillor Hunter.
Yes, I rise to endorse this plan, which I remind everyone is an award-winning plan by the Planning Institute of Australia. What I love about this plan is the extensive community consultation that was undertaken, and particularly the different style of community consultation that was undertaken, which I have advocated in a previous role across River numerous times. So it's such a pleasure to see Council adopting that approach, and hopefully we can continue to do more of that. I think we'd all say there are aspects of the report we would have liked to have seen regarding the stormwater, but we've had clear reasons for why that's not included, and there's a plan moving forward of when that will be addressed. So I'm happy to support this recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, and it's great to see at long last that this matter has come into the chamber, and we are now obviously adopting the 7 Mile Beach Local Area Plan of 2023. And may I say that some years ago there was a motion put at this place in relation to the Royal Hobart Golf Course, and in that particular time there was that reference to Council not supporting that particular development application of Regal Court, and over time that has been a matter of coming before the tribunal. But in that particular motion that came to Council at that time, there was a Part E, and there was a lot of discussion about as to whether or not the 7 Mile Beach Local Area Plan ought to be considered as part of the Regal Court motion for refusal on the Royal Golf Course proposal for refusal. But nevertheless, it got up, and over time we obviously have been dealing with Regal Court, and we're getting close, as I understand it, to a decision, and that will be very interesting given the length and time that has taken. So going back to the 7 Mile Beach Local Area Plan, it has, and may I say that Niche Studio has done a tremendous job in relation to this, and I'll be making a comment about Niche Studio in relation to Skyways, because it's a tremendous firm, and Clarence has been very lucky to have Niche up there front and basically pursuing this as part and parcel of the process. And what we have now is a fairly concise and also a community feedback that has taken some time, but it's really got into the nitty-gritty. And I would encourage members of the public and also any other persons for that reason to actually sit down and read the report, because it talks about a lot of things, about amenity, about the nature of a coastal village and how it has some challenges ahead of it. And one of those, of course, is stormwater, and we're going to have a look at that separately as we need to, because that is a very important aspect of it. So look, let's move on. There is some opportunity to look at over time the different parts of the staging of this, and I will, in summary, congratulate the former councillors, aldermen, for their basically foresight in dropping that into a motion which was highly controversial at the time, but now we have a wonderful document which I believe will be sort of a catalyst for moving forward and being able to provide a lot of these matters that Council has been able to achieve from the community consultation. And I seek my colleagues' support.
Thank you, Councillor James. Councillor Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and just reiterating some of my colleagues' comments. The consultation was absolutely excellent, award-winning consultation. It's so pleasing to be part of a council that has this working so well, because that's basing so many of our decisions. Being a local of the area, I can assure my colleagues that the residents are very happy that this has finally happened, and the Niche report has been very well accepted. It is an excellent report. And look, I just congratulate everyone for all the hard work that's gone into it. And yeah, the community, the majority of the community is very, very comfortable with where we've landed with this. And of course, we take some comfort out of see when we talk about stormwater, because obviously that is front of mind on a daily basis with residents there. But yes, very happy to support this, and congratulations once again to the team on consultation.
Thank you, Councillor Kennedy. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? There being none, I'm going to hand the chair over to the Deputy Mayor. I want to make a contribution because the 7 Mile Beach Local Area Plan provides positive and sustainable planning directions for the future of the township, with a focus on social cohesion through quality urban design and vibrant public places. Pleasingly, throughout this detailed process, the local community was highly engaged in the development of the local area plan, and the first round of community consultation was award-winning, as Councillor Hunter pointed out, and I was delighted that she was able to represent me at those awards. Council heard what the community was asking for, and in response, the community is largely supportive of the strategies outlined in the implementation plan to deliver improvements to movement networks and/or facilities in this very special part of the world, while enhancing and protecting the township's qualities valued, as Councillor Kennedy pointed out, by the local community. Increase to tree canopy is supported by the community in 7 Mile Beach Urban Tree Strategy Project. It's a separate project linking back to the local area plan to deliver this outcome, which is a very positive outcome as well. As we're also very well aware, the management of growth and stormwater issues continue to be a major concern for the 7 Mile Beach community. The stormwater management study is a separate project that is to be linked back into the local area plan through the implementation plan strategies, and the findings of this project will assist with a detailed design work for future upgrades to footpaths and community facilities in public spaces such as Lewis Park and Leyden Park. No increase in residential density throughout the township is proposed until suitable drainage solutions can be sought. Through our extensive community consultation, we heard very loudly and very clearly that the community want to retain the coastal beach vibe and prefer lower density housing to assist in maintaining the treasured coastal character. Colleagues, I'm sure we'd all agree this has been a significant body of work, and I believe it neatly positions 7 Mile Beach for sustainable growth into the future whilst addressing the pressing issue of stormwater management. I also would like to particularly acknowledge the work of Niche Studios and also our council staff, as well as those many 7 Mile Beach residents who actively participated in this project. Where we've landed is a very good place indeed. So I'll take the chair back, and Councillor Hunt, you're right to reply.
I'd just like to thank everyone for the contributions, and again note special thanks to all the staff involved, as well as Niche Studios for the excellent report. I seek your support.
Thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? That's unanimous. So moved. Thank you. Moving now on to item 8.4.2, Skyland Master Plan. Motion D, outcomes, and there's an alternate motion seeing the name of Councillor Hunter. Is there a seconder? Deputy Mayor, thank you. Councillor Hunter.
Thank you. As councillors, we want what's best for the community, socially, environmentally and economically. However, determining what is best is rather complex. In March, I moved an alternative motion for further negotiations with the Carr family in light of our collective concerns, as well as the community's. I'd like to thank Mr. Carr for his willingness to partake in this process, including meeting and hearing out those who expressed concerns. I also want to thank the council officers for being involved in this process, and also for analysing data and clarifying several points which are outlined in the council report. Now here we are with the revised plan before us. I have personally deliberated over this matter more than any other council matter that has come before us. It was one of the reasons I was interested in running for council in the first place, to ensure the sustainable growth and development of our beautiful city. After consulting with a range of professionals who work in this space, I have finally landed on something I'm comfortable with. And that is the amended motion before us tonight. And I'd like to thank Councillor Ritchie for her additions to this recommended amended motion this afternoon. What this amended recommendation does is it ensures we move into the next stage of the process, which is the development of a structure plan, where our concerns will really come to light and decisions can be made. These include providing greater clarity to the community and councillors of the process, which will include future community engagement and councillor oversight. The draft and final structure plan will come back to Council for its approval before going to the TPC and becoming a statutory document. If we're not happy with it then it stops, but I hope this won't be the case. Now, I'm under no illusion that the structure plan will not meet everyone's concerns and expectations, but this allows us to have some challenging conversations about the nuts and bolts of implementing the master plan. I clearly outlined these points to the Friends of Tranmere and Drury Point group, who have asked me to read a letter of their support tonight, which has been endorsed by their president. Quote, "On behalf of the Friends of Tranmere and Drury Peninsula, I would like to express gratitude to the Carr family for facilitating group and individual discussions, addressing concerns about the Skylands master plan. Appreciation is also extended to the councillors who have attentively considered our input during the last 3 years. Our persistent concerns remained around the Skylands' height, density, and the overall number of dwellings, posing threats to the environment, cultural sensitivities, and infrastructure sustainability. Following a meeting with Councillor Hunter, in addition to many other contributing factors, the Friends of Tranmere and Drury Peninsula endorsed the amended recommendation motion put forward by Councillor Hunter this evening. Despite the current master plan lacking a social licence, there is potential and hope for collaboration through ongoing engagement as proposed in Councillor Hunter's amended motion. We aspire to collaboratively develop a structure plan that addresses ongoing concerns, including height and density, and are dedicated to working with the Council in this next phase." End quote. So again, I want to make it really clear that I have no expectation the structure plan is going to solve all of our concerns, but it gives us that opportunity to get into the detail, which is really where the concerns lie, and to have some challenging conversations, both internally, because we all have different concerns, but also with some community members, as well as the proponents themselves. It also ensures that the development of the structure plan is retained with Council, because we all know the risk of the state government stepping in and taking this out of our hands. I therefore seek all of your endorsement of this evening.
Councillor Hunter, thank you. Deputy Mayor Councillor Ritchie, a seconder, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I'm sure colleagues will join with me in congratulating Councillor Hunter on her long-running interest in this issue, dating back from the previous motion through to where we've landed this evening. And I have no doubt that all colleagues have equally shared that internal struggle to get to the position of considering the alternate motion that's before us this evening. And I guess for some people, it's a matter of, this is probably as good as it gets in terms of being able to acknowledge that not all of the issues that many of us had and still have been addressed. I think it's fair to say that, and I really appreciate the fact that Councillor Hunter was prepared to add in some additional wording at late notice to recognise that fact that in adopting this motion, we aren't in any way sending a message that all the issues and concerns that have been out there are addressed. No, they aren't. That's certainly the case. But I've appreciated the way that people from all perspectives have been prepared to engage, put forward ideas and information. That's been appreciated. The engagement with Friends of Drury Point, the engagement with the Carr family, that's been an important part of the process for all of us, I'm sure. For me personally, getting the comfort as good as it can get around council retaining the capacity for ongoing involvement through the structure plan, and then how that plays out subsequently should there be disputes, and all of that sort of thing is what I've worked on through my mind, through the steps and how that's going to work, to give me the comfort to be able to support this tonight. I think it's a really sensible alternate that provides ongoing opportunities to continue to work through this process. So congratulations. It's a very sensible and well thought out alternate, and I'm pleased to support it, and I encourage colleagues to do likewise.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? Councillor James, thank you.
Thank you, and I was hoping others may get in before myself because this is a really important issue, and it's also has been a follow-on from the 6th of March 2023, when Councillor Hunter moved and I seconded the motion that we refuse the Skylands master plan, and also the refusals are based on the request and concerns about the 30-year Greater Hobart Plan. And also in that motion it did say, and I'm quoting Part D, and we all know what that is, and that is that should the matter not be agreed to, that Council will resume the development of the Tranmere Rokeby structure plan, or the niche plan as it has been determined. And that has been, I thought, most of the 5,000 odd people who have had concerns about the Skylands master plan, version 1. And may I say that version 2 doesn't change very much at all. It doesn't address the density. It does not address the 30-year plan, although it's been done in stages, which is what that process will basically be determined on. And also, too, the fact of the matter is that there is real concerns about the traffic management plan of an area which is basically on a peninsula, and there is very difficult to be able to have a roads system set up, and that's the very nature of what I thought wasn't necessarily addressed in version 2 of the Skylands Master Plan 2. It's very interesting to refer to the documents of the of Skyland version 2, because in that report it refers to, amongst other things, the actual process and the example of the Jindee in the city of Wanneroo, Western Australia. And a number of my colleagues went there, and they were very concerned about how that particular development was such on a large area of land. It was close to the railway network. It had a substantial services from different agencies and departments of education, etc., and so on. And in this report, it still refers to that and gives examples of the houses that not only on part of that development, but also what the United States has and how their apartments and so on, excuse me, are being referred to in this particular report. And that is, by the very nature, not referring, hasn't been addressed as far as the structure plan. Now, the niche plan, and we have already identified and praised their efforts in another chapter earlier this evening, but the simple fact of the matter is the niche plan, at a cost of this council as part of the Tranmere and Druthi Point structure plan, it was a structure plan that was developed, it was put on hold, subject to what we could come out of the Skylands plan. And that was at the cost of 80,000, of which 40,000 has been spent. And that is a fairly, very, what we call in-depth discussion in relation to it. So version 2 of the Skylands hasn't changed. The density there, they're going to encroach up to the 100-metre level. The niche plan said it should be capped at 70. and therefore there will be sort of undulating on that ridge line. But in certain places they need to maximise, in my opinion, the number of dwellings in order to condense and put it into a large area of the peninsula with this density and the traffic problems that have been concerned. So why are we now putting all our eggs in one basket on a structure plan? We are approving version 2, subject to this other information in relation to community consultation on the development of a draft structure plan and so on. But that is structure plan. What we are determining tonight is the master plan. That could be lost in the sort of complicalities and the toing and froing that may be brought forward as part of the structure plan. I believe we're making a mistake in supporting this motion.
Colleagues wishing to make a contribution. Councillor Goyne, thank you.
I just wanted to thank Councillor Hunter for bringing forward this amended motion. As it has been made clear, it's very important to us, and we each have different outcomes that we'd like to see. This is something that I deliberated over because so far this, I believe, is one of the hardest decisions we've made, and I do hope that in the future I can look back at Skylands and what we've all achieved together with the Carr family and the Friends of Drury Point and all the people at the table and all of the hard work from the staff on council and probably many further generations, and be proud of what we've achieved together by working with the community and ensuring that our ongoing consultation, as you know, the world changes and the different stages are built, things will change, and hopefully the state and federal government will keep up their end of the bargain and cater for the increased density. So I believe that this proposal is the best as we can have to measure and put in places along the way to ensure that the objectives are met for all of us and for ongoing future generations. So I seek colleague support.
Thank you, Councillor Goyne. Councillor Mulder.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I do note how quickly you catch my, even if I blink, you seem to think that I'm ready to stand, so I appreciate that. A master plan is an overview. It's a concept diagram that gives a rough draft of what we want in that particular area. To be absolutely clear, it's not based, it doesn't lock you in to anything. So, and this is a master plan that says we want residential development on Drury Point. That's the master plan. We've got a rough sketch of where the roads are going to go. We've got a rough sketch of where what the future zonings might be. And the fact that we have been through this torturous exhibition is because, as Alderman James quite rightly points out, we got ourselves up to a point where we were just about ready to do the niche plan. Along comes the developer and say, we can do better than that. And the first thing they do better than that is to completely ignore all the zones that existed there and then come to us with a master plan and eventually the removal of the urban growth boundary and densities that were never envisaged. The structure plan now, whether that's based on whether we adopt that particular master plan, which is actually completed, or whether we adopted well, we can't adopt the niche one because the world's moved on, there's a planning scheme, and therefore we've got to start from somewhere. Now, the structure plan is what goes where, what zones are where, what the road system will look like, what the water structure needs to be, what the sewerage and the drainage, and of course that bugbear of all, the density. Now, on the roads front, this is an opportunity in the structure plan. This is an instruction to get onto my pet subject. The primary road that loops between Oceana Drive and Drury Point Road, this is an opportunity to avoid the mistakes that we've made when we get dense dwelling in Bligh Street where two cars can't pass each other. It avoids the problems that we have with East Derwent Highway with private entrances in the middle of a state highway, for heaven's sake. It avoids the problems that we have on Cambridge Road and Clarence Street and any other street, Norma Street. They just roll on and on and on about cars parked on the side of the road which is being used as a major run or an arterial road to connecting localities. We could learn from what we did at Oakdowns, where there are no private entrances but a road network off the main thoroughfare. We could learn from places like Pass Road, where the entire Parenville and the Glebe Hill estates, there are no private entrances on this main road. Now, Oceana Drive is already a problem, but there's no need for us to extend that. So here's an old problem with a divided two-lane carriageway, medium strip in the middle, another median strip and a vehicle barrier, and a lovely 2.5 metre roadway for pedestrians, cyclists and disability vehicles. So that's an opportunity on the roads. On the waters, this is an opportunity to do like Dr. Howie has done at the North Bay Estate, to create swales so that the aquifer gets replenished, so the trees stand a chance, so that we can, those aquifers then only when there's surface water flow on do they end up in the hard reticulated pipes, and then only to the nearest watercourse. And that watercourse then becomes a creek down to the bay. That's where you get the sediment traps and all those sorts of things. And then there's the great opportunity to create those watercourses as a link between the foreshore trail and the Skylands trails that we have, the reserves, and therefore providing wildlife corridors, and heavens above, we might even be able to put play parks where kids are allowed to play in the mud. Shock horror. So that, if you really want a world-class new urbanism on a greenfield site, start to think about that way, not just how many houses you can stack on the hillside. And they're all made of ticky-tacky and they all look the same. That's not the future of new urbanism. Don't tell me new urbanism when you actually admittedly model it on Battery Point, which is certainly old urbanism, and it's walkable, it's within walkable distance of the city, but still plagued by traffic problems, parking and all those other sorts of things. So here is a capacity to get on with the visionary things. And with the density things, I mean, let's make sure that some of these density requirements are about services. And some of these services, I can see how one would do it. We could have one commercial centre, but 6? No, I can't see that translating.
Thank you, Councillor Mulder. Any other? Thank you, Councillor Kennedy. And then Councillor Chong.
Just very briefly, and thanks again to Councillor Hunter and the seconder, Deputy Mayor Ritchie. I think your explanations, including Councillor Goyne there, should put people's mind at rest. We've all been through a very long process, and I feel the letter in particular from the Friends of Tranmere that we've all spent a lot of time communicating with over this journey should provide the comfort that we need, and we have a lot more potential to influence this way than other ways. Thank you.
Councillor Kennedy. Councillor Chong.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and again, thank you, Councillor Hunter, for your alternate motion. It's really easy for us all to get bogged down in the details, and some of the contributions tonight are in the detail that will end up in a structure plan. But I just want to say tonight we are approving the master plan and authorising the Chief Executive Officer to go out and prepare a structure plan, knowing that in that structure plan we will all be engaged, not just us here in this chamber and the staff, but the community in the details to look at the proposal and also all of those things that the community has concerns about. As Councillor Hunter said, we may not, at the end of the day, be able to get everything right for everybody. I'd be really surprised if we could. But what we need to do in the structure plan as we move forward is get it as good as we can be by working hard at that after approving this tonight.
Councillor Warren, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. When we discussed this back in March, I had a number of concerns to do with the traffic impact, the steepness of the site, how that might make walkability not as viable as intended, and therefore require 2 cars per household and significantly impact on a transport network. So a lot of those things can be resolved by bodies outside our control. So whether the state government comes to the party and does in fact build the required networks, and including the ferry. At the moment, none of that is certain. There is a lot to like about the new urbanism. I visited Gindee under my own initiative last year, and unfortunately I'm old enough to recognise Councillor Moulder's reference to they were all made out of tiki-taki and they all look just the same, because they don't. It's a delightful suburb. I can understand people wanting to live there. However, it is on flat land and with services nearby, so it's quite different to the proposed Skylands. So I still have a number of those concerns. But there is a lot to like about the style of the development, particularly the proposed reserve at the top. I would love to imagine a utopian future where people can walk and ride in their neighbourhood to schools and cafes. With the appropriate infrastructure, that may well happen. I guess what gives me comfort about this is that we do retain control of the structure plan, and I do thank Councillor Hunter for her work, particularly in working with all the stakeholders. And the thing that gets me across the line on this is that the Friends of Druthi Point are willing to go to the next step and see how we go and to be involved in that conversation. So tonight I'm happy to support this recommendation.
Councillor Duncan.
Thank you. I'll be brief because it's basically the same as everyone else has been saying. To thank Councillor Hunter for bringing forward this alternative motion, which does bridge that gap that we've been battling with, bringing that certainty that we have that we'll be able to actually bring this forwards with the checks and balances that we all so desperately want to see in this project. I should note that there was a reference to the US being car-centric, and I think you could say anything of Skylands except that it's car-centric with it being the narrow streets and the walkable design. But I do sincerely hope that we are able to realise the assurances that are before us and make this as good as it can be.
Councillor Walker or Councillor Hume first, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I thank Councillor Hunter for her motion. The extra words in it, I mean, I understand according to the advice we had, they are talking about a process that the officers were going to follow. But having said that, it doesn't hurt to put them in there to give councillors and also to give the community the comfort that there will be an ongoing involvement, ongoing consultation as the structure plan is developed. I still believe that this should have been approved and been going forward on the 6th of March. I was really pleased to be part of the trip to Perth and to see the examples of new urbanism. And one of the things that really struck me was DPZ, as they had worked on these projects and gone forward to Gindee being now probably the best example, had been able to build and improve on what they developed and make it better and better. And so I actually believe Skylands has the potential to be even better again, to build on what they've learnt from Gindee, and to be an exemplar, but also an example to other places in Tasmania where we don't typically see this kind of development, and I don't actually think Battery Point is a very good example. Now, I understand, concerns have been raised. One of the big concerns is about density and resulting traffic. I think it's important to understand that the density is an important, and we're hearing about the magic 70-metre line again, which is an anachronism. That's about ability to pump water, which is no longer a consideration. But the density is needed to make this work, because it actually provides the residential mass that's needed to support the commercial centres. The commercial centres are needed to support the walkability, the encouragement of active transport, but also the community connection that comes with these types of developments. And that's something that I really saw an example of talking to. We spoke to residents of Gindee, and they talked about how incredibly connected their community is to places where they'd lived previously, where by having that density and not a lot of private open space, but lots of public open space, much more public open space than in normal urban development, there was the opportunity to interact with other people. And so the neighbours all knew each other. They had regular events for Halloween and New Year's Eve in public spaces, and there was a real sense of community. So what we're looking at here, the potential for, is a place that is more livable than what we're used to. Now, I understand the point that there could be alternatives, but ultimately whatever is put in place here has to be something that someone's actually going to move forward with and develop. And that's why it's important, the proponent has put forward this structure plan, because if we impose something on the area, what if nobody develops it? The other alternative is you look at the kind of developments we've had in the past and under the existing planning controls. If you're worried about pressure on the infrastructure, this actually gives us an opportunity, because of this centralised approach to planning, which hasn't happened on this scale in Tasmania. We can actually plan for the infrastructure, something we're not able to do with the urban sprawl that we've become so accustomed to. And the urban sprawl that we've become so accustomed to is very car-friendly but not so pedestrian-friendly. It doesn't create connected communities and a better lifestyle. And that's the alternative we could possibly be looking at. Noting also that 2,500 dwellings proposed. The advice we had is that under existing planning controls, there could be potentially up to 4,000 dwellings. So I believe this is a really good outcome. I'd like to congratulate our expert staff from various departments who've provided advice and input addressing all the questions and concerns that have been raised by councillors. And not everyone's going to be convinced of the merits of this development. I think it's a minor miracle that Councillor Hunter's managed to bring Friends of Tranmere and Drury Point along for the ride. Not that I accept that they're necessarily the gatekeepers of whether this has social licence or not, because I have had feedback from a lot of members of the community that were as bewildered as I was that we didn't go forward with it on the 6th of March. But look, what I can say with 100% confidence is that this development will be better than the kind that we're used to.
Thank you, Councillor Hume. Councillor Walker.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity to speak to this. I will be supporting this alternate motion, even though in many ways I would be happy with the other one. I think it's important to note that part of the foundation of this motion is to, if you like, try and bring the developer, council and the likes of Friends of Tranmere Drury Point more in alignment, and I think that's to be lauded. I was very disappointed with Council's decision of March 6, and the ramifications followed from that, and the land was we forfeited, if you like, our say in the matter, and it went on to the next level of government. And I think that we are better placed to handle matters if we can be responsible and look at things diligently. And here's the point. This, I am very excited about this concept. It is unique. It's not something that we've seen elsewhere. I do believe it will be something of a demonstration site for other councils in the state. I think the level of public open space associated with it is remarkable. It's like nothing we've ever seen, and some of these points just sort of get just sort of ticked across the line because, and just a mere token acknowledgement. They're huge concessions not made begrudgingly, but concessions made willingly because there is a desire amongst the developer to really leave a legacy of high-end planning and community living that we just don't see in this state. Now we can, dig in our horns if we want, and maybe the result will be, the proponent walking away. And I think Alderman Hume, Councillor Hume, intimated, Mr. Mayor, just how many dwellings might go there on the business as usual approach. And business as usual isn't beautiful. Business as usual is basically creating heat sinks, very little vegetation, it's not creating livability, whereas this proposal can. So I thank the developer for their perseverance. I hope that that we use this process to come up with a set of comfort and control, a set of potential controls, and to optimise the community living that will occur. And I'm hopeful that that's what will happen. So, noting, as I said, that I think Council made the wrong decision on March the 6th, noting that land has now been rezoned, I think that we should work positively on this matter.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. And before I call on Councillor Hunter for her right of reply, I'll enter the debate now as a councillor. And colleagues, as you will recall from my contribution back in March, from day one, I've been an ardent supporter of the Skyland Master Plan. And as I said back then, my reason is simple. Tasmania is in desperate need of this type of truly transformational design and development approach. We simply cannot continue with the familiar post-1970s suburbanism that has dominated the growth of Greater Hobart. To do that, in my view, would be doing a huge disservice to our city and those who elected us. As you know, this site is the most significant development site in Australia in terms of its permanent impact on the form of a capital city. This new urbanism with walkable communities will be at the forefront of urban planning, and we have the opportunity to make an historic and extremely positive mark on Greater Hobart. Importantly, as has already been touched on by the last two speakers, this plan provides more than seven times the area for open space that is required by any other developer, more than 7 times. This will deliver community facilities such as schools, shops, community hubs, as well as social and affordable housing. Of course, we also have an obligation to ensure we keep pace with the housing demands of our growing city, and this is something this development delivers in spades. Colleagues, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge both the Carr family and the Friends of Tranmere and Druthi Point Association, and thank them for their preparedness to meet and negotiate in good faith. I believe we've landed in a very good spot, and I thank them all for their respective roles that they've played in achieving the result before us this evening. And of course, I also acknowledge the mammoth work of Councillor Hunter as well. Colleagues, as you know, this will occur over a 30-year time frame, allowing us to consider improvements to design and infrastructure upgrades as we progress. However, due to the unprecedented growth in our city, we are, as you all know, already planning for rapid growth and the required infrastructure, as evidenced by the Rokeby Road realignment project, the Pass Road upgrade, the Rokeby Park and Ride that I was with Minister Ferguson earlier this year for that announcement, as well as the expansion of the River Derwent ferry service. Colleagues, Skyland is an exciting development for the City of Clarence and has my 100% support, and I urge you all to likewise support it. Councillor Hunter, your right of reply, please.
Thank you. Thank you for everyone for their contributions this evening. They all have valid merits. When I stood up here in March, one of the first things I said was I wanted to really like the Skylands plan, and there were lots of positive aspects in there that I did support, but I just couldn't land with my own confidence to give it my support at the time. While this plan might not be ideal for some of us, many of us, not sure, we don't want to risk losing it. And there are positive aspects in here that I'm keen to see develop and investigate. And I would hope and expect that the first round of developing that structure plan is to do the technical assessments, to understand the actual site and the feasibility of this master plan to the site, because it will probably change the concept that is the master plan and whether this level of density can be built across the entire site. And that might change things, and we would expect that to happen. But I'm keen to see that process unfold and to be involved. So thank you, everyone. I seek your support this evening, and the next year will be quite challenging, I suspect, but I think we're all up for the challenge.
Councillor Hunter, thank you. Colleagues, before I put the amended motion, just make a note that there are actually 5 points to this motion, not 4, and that is that the first one being notes, point 1, notes that the requirement of motion D of item 5.2 of the 6 March 2023 Council minutes has now been concluded, full stop. Then point 2 approves the revised Skylands Master Plan 5 November 2023 version, and then sequentially after that, so authorised Chief Executive Officer will be number 3, notes the development of a structured plan will move from 3 to 4, and 4, request the Chief Executive Officer develop and issue a community information sheet, etc., be number 5. Is that clear to everyone?
Has that been circulated?
It's on the. It's the same motion. It's just different numbering, Councillor James. Just explaining that so everyone is fully aware of what they're voting on. Are there any other questions on this? There being none, I'll put the amended motion moved by Councillor Hunter, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. All those in favour? Those against? So carried. Thank you. Moving now on to item 8.4.3, managing conflicts of interest of councillors, framework proposal submission. I'll call for a mover of the motion or the recommendation. Councillor Chong, thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Hume, thank you. Councillor Chong.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I won't be long. I think the report that's been done... Sorry. Yes, quick exodus there. The submission that's been made from the officers gives a really good rundown of the particular items that have been mentioned. Like many of these things, the devil will be in the detail. I note particular things like how we're going to manage actual conflicts of interest and how a particular councillor can be excluded from accessing documents, and how we look at when a mayor can overturn a council's decision to participate in something. These things will need to be worked out, and however we come to those at some point, I'm sure this will come back to us for ratification.
Thank you, Councillor Chong. Councillor Hume.
Thank you, Mayor. I was one of the councillors that provided feedback on this submission. And one of the points I think that's important to note is there's a provision in the proposal about restricting councillors' access to material when they have a conflict of interest. And I just provided some comments in terms of the practicality of doing that, but also there's a big question that's unanswered in the proposal about whose responsibility that's going to be. And if you're going to make it a responsibility, then you need to either provide some kind of incentives or penalties. I don't believe it's fair to put that on council staff. You could say it's the responsibility of the council as a whole, or, as we've submitted, the responsibility of individual councillors to just not access that material. Because I can imagine that there are a number of councils who it's going to take some additional resources to implement that if they're going to actually restrict access to certain materials, and particularly when they're parts of agendas or larger documents. So I guess that's something that could possibly be looked at when it comes to in terms of the future local government review and shared services, shared ICT services. But that's certainly something that I think in furthering this proposal, the government really needs to look very carefully at and be very cautious about in how they approach it.
Thank you, Councillor Hume. Any other colleagues wishing to contribute? Deputy Mayor, Councillor Ritchie, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I appreciate the effort that our staff have gone to in preparing a submission on behalf of council, given obviously a set document in which, to which they were requested to provide response. I actually was also one of the councillors that provided input back into the council staff in relation to this. My concerns, the concerns that I actually raised, remain. I have some concern that we will see potentially through this process, well, already In fact, councillors at local government level, in my opinion, are held to a higher standard than any other level of government in terms of declarations of interests and all of that type of thing, looking at what our federal counterparts, federally elected members declare, looking at what state members declare. I can assure you none of them are declaring perceived or potential conflicts, and indeed the word what's reasonably perceived or reasonably a potential isn't even included. So that just is so broad to me that it's very concerning. And I did appreciate that my suggestion that if they must insist on going down this track, that only actual conflicts are on a public register, whereas perhaps perceived and potential could be registered and managed by the staff in-house, and that only go public when they become actual. You know, there's those sorts of things, because I can foresee this being played with in a particularly dangerous way, where anything can be perceived, anything can be potential, and become suddenly a really a nightmare to administer. I'm very uncomfortable with where they're heading. Also, if they're basing it on the Victorian model, they actually include staff. Staff come under the umbrella of their legislation. They haven't attempted to go down that process here. Now, staff, as we know, they are actually dealing with more planning items than we. And yet, no one has seen fit. We're just leaving it up to councils to then decide whether to apply that through their own policies subsequently. Also, I don't think that's good enough. So there's a whole range of things. Now, I don't want to stand in a way of the submission. I don't know whether it would be acceptable to Councillor Chong and Councillor Hume to amend, and indeed I'm happy to take advice, but just on point B, rather than say endorse the submission, put notes. So I don't want to stop it from going off. I respect that, but I intend to make my own submission separate to this. So, so naturally I'm just trying to find a way to work through that. I don't see that in any way should impede, but I'm happy to take advice from our CEO if he has a problem with it just being noted, the submission noted. I don't know that stops us, the council, from sending off the submission per se.
Can we stop the clock, please, CEO?
Thank you, Mayor. I think there is a potential risk with just noting it as to whether it authorises me to actually send that off. So I wonder whether the mid-ground might be approves or something like that. But at the end of the day, I'm happy to do whatever council wishes.
So just to follow up, Mr Mayor, with your indulgence, so perhaps a mid-ground would be that we note the submission and authorise or approve the CEO to submit.
Yes, that might work.
Yeah.
Is that acceptable to the mover? It's a bit clumsy at the moment. We might have to clean up the language. So notes the submission and approves for the CEO to submit to the Department of Premier and Cabinet as feedback on the discussion paper. I don't think they'd clean it up anymore, but...
About authorises the CEO.
Yeah, that's it.
I guess I'm reluctant. I think if anybody else wants to make their own submission, that's actually perfectly fine. But we're endorsing this submission on behalf of council. It's not on behalf of an individual. So unless we could find a way to really tidy it up, I personally would be reluctant to change it.
Accept your position. As I said, I'm trying to find a way through. My alternate position, of course, is to just vote against it, which, you know, I was trying to avoid, but will do if that's the case. So, look...
Like Councillor Chong, I just don't think the wording provides clarity that this submission is on behalf of council.
Okay, well, leave it as it is.
So look, I'm happy to
look.
That's fine. I've made the offer, and as mover and seconder, if you're not comfortable with it, that's fine. I'll, if there are no other alternatives put forward, then, I will not be supporting the motion as it stands, because I actually think that we're headed down a pathway that they need to go back to the drawing board a little bit on and revisit what they're actually doing here. So that's my contribution, and nevertheless I thank colleagues.
Thanks, Councillor Ritchie. Was that a movement, Councillor Mulder?
How astute. I hope your eyes was accurate later in the evening.
The night is long. The floor is yours, Councillor Mulder.
I'm about to make it longer. I am... let's get back to the basics of this. There's a lot of energy and effort goes into this from the local government office. There's a lot of energy goes into it from the council. There's a lot of energy goes into it from us people. So what's the problem we're trying to solve here? There's a few cases where conflicts of interest, pecuniary and otherwise, and they're adequately dealt with in the legislation at the moment. People have been prosecuted. And then now you start to introduce all this convoluted stuff. And this isn't a reflection on the officers, because many of these points are made by the officers in their report, which is why I think it's a really good idea to note them. But I can't endorse the whole report, but because I endorse it, if you ask me to endorse it, you're asking the lock, stock and barrel. And there are things in there that I disagree with and that I would do a thing. But I mean, one of the submissions I would say is, where's the bit that I just mentioned? What's the problem we're trying to solve here? In fact, we're creating problems. This perception of interests and what is perception and when it comes and the word reasonable gets mentioned again, as does the Book of Kells. And, so we keep going down this path. We have a host of an office here, while a state government that promised reform of election donation laws has sat on its hands, where we have premiers, and I'm going back a fair few years here now, where we have premiers, who are then ministers for infrastructure, who employ their brothers, and I see, to form a consulting company that then consults to what is now state growth. Yet that's not a conflict of interest, because that's not hands off. But so what's the problem? And if there is a problem, how about the state government fix its own problems first before engaging the Office of Local Government to try to fix a problem that we don't have and that is adequately dealt with now? So, I hate to say it, but I don't know who commissioned the thing, but certainly it's, this is a proposal which I always argue whenever you see the government trying to reform local government or try to add new things, it's a smokescreen. And I reckon the best way to form the model is to try it on themselves and if they like it, then impose it on everyone else. We've got, and I'll just go back to it, how long have they promised donation law reforms and they've sat on their hands? And then you get, all this stuff. How about some energy into that, because that's where the crookedness is. That's where the potential for corruption comes, when you get those sorts of things. So get your own house in order. I don't know of I certainly have never been approached with someone offering money to change a decision. I mean, those days, well, of course, there are cases in New South Wales, I think, where, but it's normally ministers of the Crown, not the local government. It's the ministers of the Crown who are leaning on the local government or looking after their mates. And I can't see much of that, the potential for that here. So, as always, I'm interested in this stuff, but so much, gazing into our navels whilst their own are full of lint.
Councillor Hunter.
I'm almost tempted to have a bit of fun, and if I had better acting skills, I'd try to impersonate Councillor Mulder's orating skills to have a good time. I actually fully support what's written in the letter. I think it makes sense. I think it's reasonable. Being a new councillor and coming in, I wish this had existed, because looking at conflicts of interest, I didn't find it that clear. Yes, there's legislation, but that doesn't make it clear enough, and I think this will do it. And as was mentioned before, the devil's in the detail, but I think that's clearly outlined in the submission.
Councillor Warren.
Why shouldn't we try to be leaders in this field rather than sinking to the low depths of the other houses of Parliament?
Thank you. Councillor Walker.
I so won't die in the ditch on this, but as I try to bring some unity around the table, I'm wondering whether the mover and the seconder would go along with changing point B from endorses a submission to approves the submission. to the Department of Premier and Cabinet as feedback on the discussion paper. What's the difference? I approve of people putting Rick Astley on their stereo as loud as they like, but I hardly endorse it.
There's no answer to that.
Yes, you approve it.
This kind of question.
Councillor Chong, Councillor Hume, is that something you'd entertain?
I think that wording still makes it clear that it's on behalf of council, so I think we can accept
Happy
it.
with that? All right, then with that change, now becomes the motion. Councillor Gordon will be back shortly. Councillor James, you wish to?
No.
Okay, excellent. Well, listen, with that discussion, colleagues, right of reply, Councillor Chong, yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for all of the valuable contributions from my colleagues, and I seek your support.
Thank you. Well, I'll now put the motion, that is that with that change to Part B, endorses is changed, is swapped with approves the submission. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? So carried. Thank you. Moving now on to 8.4.4 Dog Management Policy 2021, consultation on proposed changes to declared areas, South Street Reserve and Bell Reef Boardwalk. Is there a mover for the motion? Councillor Chong, thank you. Seconded, Councillor Kennedy. Councillor Chong.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Great community consultation. Really good to see that the plans have been changed based on the submission that's been received, and that generally the very, very positive reactions to this. It'll be great to see the 12-month trial.
Thank you very much. Councillor Kennedy.
Not much more, Mr. Mayor. Likewise, the one thing I was really pleased to see that under D1, the boardwalk still remains on leash only, which is sensible and should alleviate the worries of some of the business owners there that promote themselves as dog friendly. So, yep, happy to support.
Thank you very much. Any other colleagues? Councillor Hume, thank you.
Also in relation to the board work, I think it's great that that invisible line's been removed, except for in the case of events. And I noticed that in some of the feedback in the associated report, there were people who said that they weren't even aware that that line existed, and they thought that all of the boardwalk was available to exercise dogs. So I think that's a good outcome.
Thank you. Any other colleagues wish to make a contribution? There being none, right of reply, Councillor Chong. Thank you, colleagues. I'll put the motion. That is the recommendation. All those in favour? Thank you. Now, I do note that I did indicate that we were going to have a break, but I won't do it at this juncture. So the Deputy Mayor has the call. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you.
For item 8.4.5, opportunity for an AFL High Performance Centre in Clarence.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In rising to support the motion before the council, I want to say from the outset that I acknowledge and respect that there are and will be. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, Councillor John, you're seconding. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My apologies. I was looking forward to the break.
So I want to acknowledge that there are and will be a range of differing views around the chamber and indeed in the broader community on this issue, and I fully appreciate that those views may range from those opposing any notion of an AFLW High Performance Centre in Clarence to those who are deeply passionate about securing such an opportunity, and perhaps everything in between. In May 2023, as we know, the state government signed the AFL agreement to establish a Tasmanian AFL and AFLW club, proposed to join the AFL and AFLW competitions from 2028. The Tasmanian government subsequently committed up to $60 million for a high performance facility, with a further $10 million coming from the AFL, with the goal of that facility to be ready for use in 2026. Naturally, a high performance centre, which will be the home of the Tasmanian club, will play an important role in providing the players, coaches and administrators with every opportunity to be successful both on and off the field. However, I think we all agree, and this has been acknowledged very broadly in the community and beyond, I think, that it's important that there is a community benefit that needs to be arrived at as part of any future facility development. Following a decision by Council on October the 9th, this year, consultation with the community on the potential for hosting a high-performance centre in Clarence was undertaken from the 10th of October to the 7th of November. And while I don't need to go into the detail of the results of that consultation, which we've discussed at workshop and is readily available online, I think just the key pull-out from that, the 959 survey responses that were received, 79% of which were from Clarence residents, and of those, 68% of Clarence residents and 79% of non-Clarence residents supported the idea of locating a high-performance centre in Clarence. And at this time, I'd like to acknowledge the input provided by those people that participated in the consultation process. And further, I'd like to express my thanks to all those people that have taken the time to contact me directly. I've greatly appreciated the way that people have gone about it, the professional and respectful way in which these efforts have been made, including by many people that have attended here this evening. Mr Mayor, we all know community sporting infrastructure can have a variety of positive impacts for individuals, community and the economy. Community-based sporting infrastructure can be a great asset that can help bring communities together, encourage people to participate as players and volunteers, boost economic activity and help to provide a catalyst for ongoing development and engagement. I'm supporting the motion that's before us tonight to provide in-principle support for our city to be considered as a possible location for the AFL High Performance Centre, because I genuinely believe that if done correctly and sensitively, this provides an opportunity that could positively impact on Clarence in many ways that include social inclusion and diversity, education, employment, economic activity, health and wellbeing, community development and connectedness. And I believe it's fair to say that most local councils would not disagree with the principles around the benefits that a high-performance centre could bring to any region. And we've seen local reporting that's detailed the economic predictions, and there's a plethora of research out there that details the value of these sorts of infrastructure assets, and indeed research carried out by the Centre of Sport and Social Impact at La Trobe University provided pretty clear details of the social, health and community and economic benefits of a community football club. Indeed, it states that for every $1 spent to run the club, there's at least a $4.40 return in social value in terms of increasing social connectedness, well-being, mental health status, employment outcomes, personal development, civic pride, physical health and support for other community groups. It's pretty extensive. So this being said, I want to say, and I recognise that the issue primarily, I think, for most of us is around location, and that's where we may differ. And to this end, for me, this is not a matter of just saying, let's grab this opportunity at the expense of all the other things that we care about. That's not what I'm saying at all, and that's not what I stand for. I don't believe, for example, that the potential for a high-performance centre and the City Heart Plan are actually mutually exclusive, and in fact, I feel quite the opposite about it. I believe that the inclusion of a high-performance centre in Clarence could actually enliven the City Heart Plan in a way that makes it even better. But all this is potential. For the moment, the motion before us seeks in-principle support for the Rosny CBD to be considered. I seek support from councillors.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Chong.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And I'll try not to repeat what Councillor Ritchie has just ably said. And I guess I'd like to start by thanking the number of residents and ratepayers who've got in touch with me since this went out in the agenda. A myriad of phone calls, emails, and so on. And the bulk of them, to be honest, very much in support of us having the High Performance Centre in Clarence. A couple of form negatives this morning, but otherwise really positive, including someone who called today and said he didn't actually even like AFL, wasn't interested in watching AFL at all, but was really keen on us having the High Performance Centre here because he could see the community benefits that it would bring. And I think, as Councillor Ritchie has said, those are the things that we want to look at when we think about in-principle support for this high-performance centre here. It's not just about the AFL and AFLW teams and them having a nice home to play in. It's about everything else that it brings to our city. So both in terms of social well-being, potential community access and economic well-being. Let's be realistic. You know, there will be economic benefits to our city if we approve this and it comes to Clarence. And we would be naive to think that that shouldn't be part of our consideration, because we all want jobs for the people who live here. We all want to spread our rate base more, because all of those things are important to the people who live here, and we should take those into consideration as well. So I'm supporting, in principle support, for this to be the home of the AFL, to go to DSG and the AFL to make their decision, and I hope my colleagues will too.
Thank you, Councillor Chong. Councillor Warren.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I thank the Deputy Mayor for drawing the distinction between our interest in having the AFL High Performance Centre and its location. Because it's interesting, isn't it, how different people see a piece of land and see it quite differently. You know, we've got this beautiful parkland out there. It's full of mature gum trees and birds and habitat, and it's an oasis in the middle of our city. It's somewhere you can go and breathe and hear birds song, children playing, but some people would divide that in half and put a concrete structure with an AFL oval in the middle of it. Now, AFL is not a quiet sport. You put that in the middle of the oasis, you no longer have an oasis. They don't coexist. I'm wondering if, and you know, this was not our proposal. This was a proposal that was made by the state government. They said, oh, there's a bit of land you're not using, let's put 2 ovals there. And I'm glad we've talked them down from 2 ovals. But, you know, I wonder if they would have the same reaction if someone said, oh, St David's Park, you know, there's a nice big piece of land in the middle of the city that, you know, ticks all the boxes in terms of proximity. Why don't we put 2 ovals there? I don't think that would go down very well. I do want to just clarify or correct something that was said earlier by one of our deputies, who's mentioned that the majority of people in Clarence strongly support this. That's incorrect, and the Deputy Mayor has clarified that. It was the majority of the 959 people who responded to the survey who supported it, 3/4 of those people or so. There are 42,000 people in Clarence, or people who vote anyway. More than that now, I think it was 42,000 a while ago. And I've certainly had a number of people contact me very concerned, A, that they weren't even aware that this was a proposal until they saw the agenda, and B, that nobody asked them. So, you know, it's really unfortunate that we were put in the position by the state government that we didn't have the opportunity to do our award-winning consultation strategy and reach a number of people in a number of different ways, because we did not reach the majority of people in Clarence, and the majority of people do not feel like they've had the opportunity to have their say. And I suspect that if they did, that the outcome would be quite different. So I do want to make that clear, that the survey, yes, it was a high return as far as surveys go, but in terms of the proportion of residents of Clarence, it was a minuscule amount, 959 out of tens of thousands. So I absolutely support the idea of having an AFL High Performance Centre in Clarence. I mean, the benefits, I imagine that each one of my colleagues who supports this motion is going to list the benefits ad nauseum. That's not what we should be discussing. What we should be discussing is this where it goes? And I absolutely reject sabotaging that beautiful piece of green space out there. I mean, you only have to think back 3 years to the height of COVID, when people were in lockdown and discovered the absolute joy of being able to go out and walk in their neighbourhood, and the absolute passion for nature that people rediscovered during that time. Now, we're about to plan for the future by densifying the city centre. That's part of our City Heart Plan. We're going to build as many dwellings as we can in a close area, close to the services. What they will not have is green space. If we destroy that, we are destroying what we've been talking about at Skylands, where people have said how important the green space is. I heard several of you say that, several of my colleagues, and we think that that's really important, but here we say, oh no, we've got the chance for this free AFL High Performance Centre that someone else is going to pay for. Let's just, never mind the trees, we'll just mow all those down and we'll stick an oval there and a few buildings, and because there's money involved, we're going to get all that money. And, oh yeah, benefits from the, children and things. So, I think, yes, let's have the High Performance Centre, but let's not have it there. And so I don't support this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Darko?
Thank you. Surprising no one, I will be echoing Councillor Warren's concerns. The Parklands presents to us an asset for generations to come as a community green space, and I don't accept that we need something like a high performance centre in the middle of that as a draw card to pull people in, because we already have the outdoor entertainment area, we have the All Abilities playground. There's a lot there already to bring people in. So I think that we will be doing a great disservice to the future residents of Clarence if we did approve it as it stands. I cannot support this version of the motion, but the circulated amended motion I could support.
Thank you. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? Oh, Councillor Kennedy, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
You're taking lessons from across the other.
A couple of points that I'll pick up on there. I was one of a number of us around council that fought very hard to save the golf course. Now, that may be more passive recreation, but I still, on a regular basis, bump into a number of those people that can no longer play golf there that are really supportive of it becoming a high performance centre. So they lost on one hand, they feel like they're gaining on another. We talk about consultation. Now, my experience with consultation is a small sample, if done correctly, and we've heard about our award-winning comms team, a small sample done correctly is as effective as a large sample. It's true. So we go out to community to consult. We've had the results, and I have had a huge amount of feedback that is positive. Small businesses are out there just waiting for this decision. They're just praying that this goes ahead because it's not easy out there being a small business owner. So the economic benefits are massive, but most importantly for young people, especially the ones that I've engaged with, they want the high performance centre in their city. They want to have a side that they can, if young people can see it, they can potentially be it. There's a lot of excitement out there around this potential of a high performance centre. So think about future generations. We still have a lot of public open space, green space to be utilised. It wasn't that long ago that the golf course could have been turned into anything else. So, I am supporting this, and I'm supporting it for the future generations that come behind us.
Thank you, Councillor Kennedy. Councillor Goyne.
Thank you. I just wanted to reiterate the fact that we, all the talk is of getting rid of the parklands. We are using a percentage of the parklands to put in something that will be viable for future generations, as Councillor Kennedy mentioned. I do believe that it will be activating this space, and I'm sure that we can work with the proponents to do the best for our community. As our council has continuously shown, we consult with our community, we listen to our community, and if we were to disregard this as a small sample of a survey, then we'd need to disregard all of our surveys because they're all far smaller than the feedback we've been getting for this. So I seek colleague support.
Thank you. Councillor Hunter.
It's been great sitting here tonight with some big decisions and being reminded of how privileged we all are to be sitting at this table and making these decisions on behalf of the community. I want the High Performance Centre in Clarence. I completely recognise the possibility and opportunity it provides us and our community. However, my position on it being located in the parklands hasn't changed from October 9th. I didn't support it going out to community consultation because I clearly said it would have no bearing on my decision of whether or not I thought we should put it there. And again, as chair of the Sustainability Advisory Committee, I have a duty to hold this organisation to account to the sustainability strategy. I take that really seriously. That parklands is proposed to be a visionary space in the City Heart Plan. And while we can't see its value clearly now, when we have more growth and development around this area, it'll make more sense. For me, it's similar to the Queen's Domain, where I've worked in the natural value and parks and recreation space for a number of years. And the issues there are that it doesn't, the formal recreation that exists and sporting grounds there, people only come to those for those activities. They don't engage with the natural spaces. However, to me, the merits of the Queen's Domain lie in the passive and active informal recreation opportunities. That's what it's really valued for. I'm really supportive of this high performance centre, but I'd only be supportive if it was all located on that side of the road. I'm very supportive of it in Charles Hand Park. Again, it's not ideal because there were other things proposed for that site in the City Heart Plan, but for me, that's that compromise. I'm also willing to make that compromise around the Rosny College site. So if there was an alternative motion put forth tonight, I'd be happy to support that.
Councillor Walker.
Thank you. Look, I don't believe the best decisions are made under very tight time deadlines. And given the gravity of the decision, this is pretty far from the way I'd like to be covering it. And it's less likely that we're going to arrive at an optimal outcome. But we are where we are. As economist and philosopher Thomas Sowell has been known to say, there are no solutions, there are just trade-offs. And that is where this council finds itself tonight. If we don't submit an option, then we forgo potential upside of hosting a high-performance centre. If we endorse the recommendations as listed in the agenda, then we trade off the Rosny Parklands and its incredible potential needlessly. Charles Hand Park I can come at, but not forgoing the parklands. That's trading off our own central park, an incredible green space adjoining the CBD, a site of greater dimensions than the Botanical Gardens, an area that's importance will only grow over time. And what is your vision for our CBD? Well, mine includes more residential apartment living and being the commercial precinct of choice for businesses, having passive recreation options on people's doorsteps to make apartment living appealing. The parkland gives our city an edge for both work and play. And the great news is we don't have to trade it off to provide a compelling offer for the high performance centre. Now, my read from the last time council dealt with this is that at least 5 councillors, including me, were not, and I'm going to presume still not, willing to trade off the parklands because it's trading away the future quality of life for generations to come. It should be the easiest decision there is. Save the parklands by including Kangaroo Bay Oval as the second oval for the High Performance Centre, which can and should be situated in Charles Hand Park. That was the alternative that I've circulated, and it's a serious option. It's one that's been given rigorous and robust examination. And it really should be the number one choice given the profound challenges that come with trying to develop on the parklands. The reason why it's gone from 2 ovals down to 1 is because it's a great big slope and no amount of emotional support chainsaws or sensitive bulldozers that do the cut and fill are going to take away from the bizarre and incredibly costly amount of work it's going to take to get that oval in there. And I say again, there's already one built at Kangaroo Bay. It's there. It would make a brilliant second oval as part of the proposition. So, in circumstances where my motion is where this motion is defeated or drawn, then it's my intention to move the motion that I foreshadowed. And I ask all councillors, I plead to all councillors around this table to reflect right now what legacy you are going to be leaving in the long term with the decision you make tonight. Find the courage to do the right thing, because we can still have the most compelling bid for the High Performance Centre and leave the parklands intact. We're told that the high performance centre location is down to 2 councils, that the other proposal is the Twin Ovals in Kingborough. Now, fun fact about that location is 15 k's by car from Macquarie Point. If we expand 15k from Macquarie Point to the Eastern Shore, we can get to Cambridge with change, and we can get all the way down to Bayview College. So isn't it remarkable that the only option before us was the park lanes in the precinct, and yet 15k's is okay in the other direction? Absolutely remarkable. And the point about areas like Clarence Plains, which would be my preferred thing, is that it could make the high performance centre truly inspirational, truly transformational for a community. But I've got to say that with the exception of maybe Melbourne Demon supporters, I'm beginning to get some serious doubts as whether the AFL actually like a lot of their heartland fan base. But then again, I wouldn't know, and I wouldn't possibly comment. If we preserve the parklands by using just the other side of Rosny Hill Road, we'll have a defined sporting precinct, a tennis club, a bowls club, the best situated high performance centre in the AFL. Don't sell out the future for short-term expediency on this motion. Imagine a new development squad prospect who's come down to Tasmania weighing up this location versus, say, West, GWS. They'd stay overnight in town, they'd catch the ferry across, they'd get to see the first oval being Kangaroo Bay Oval and see the centre all in the one location. This site will be supreme compared to anywhere else, and the parklands will still be there. Please think this through seriously. We don't have to blow the opportunity. We can have both.
Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? Councillor Hume, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to start off by thanking Councillor Warren for making a point that, yes, public consultation doesn't necessarily reflect the views of all of our residents and ratepayers, and that was a point I made in the debate on the Kangaroo Bay Wharf site. But we don't necessarily know what all of our residents and ratepayers are thinking. And as such, when I approach this decision, when it comes to public input, I look at it from a point of view of the quality, not the quantity of the submissions that are made and the arguments that are made. One of the things that I've really been grappling with this decision because, as has been observed by other colleagues, yes, it's really unfortunate and not ideal, the time frame in which we've had to try and make this decision, and something that could be a monumental decision for our city. But having said that, the magnitude of this opportunity is such that I don't think we can reject a high performance centre out of hand. Now, yes, there are distinct questions as to having the high performance centre located in Clarence and where exactly it is located. But the other thing we need to recognise is that it's not entirely up to us where it's located once we agree on the first point, which I believe most people, if not all councillors, agree. The issue is, and we've had consultations with the Department of State Growth and with the Tasmanian AFL Club, we know what sort of proposal is likely to be supported by them and is likely to be acceptable to them. And my view is that if we don't support the recommendation that's before us, then we're not going to have a proposal that will be accepted. Now, Councillor Walker was correct certainly in one thing that he said, which was that we can have both. Let's recognise that the parklands are a huge public open space, 45 hectares. We're talking about, with this proposal, not taking up all of the parklands, and the original proposal that located the 2 ovals on the parklands and took up the majority of that space certainly wouldn't have been something that was acceptable to me, but I believe what we've got is a good compromise, and it's a compromise that presents something that can actually draw people to that space to enjoy the other amenities and facilities, whether it be play parks and walking trails and so on. But let's understand the significance of what we potentially have to gain if we do secure this high performance centre, and beat Kingborough in the bid, and we know that Kingborough is unanimous behind their bid, and that is something like the order, I believe it's $70 million of construction. The SGS report, I think, was talking about something in the order of tens of millions in economic benefits, a couple of hundred ongoing jobs, various social benefits in terms of other clubs and community users using not just the sporting facilities, but understanding what other high-performance centres offer. There are facilities that don't stand on their own if just players are using them and are shared with the community. And I've heard of examples of, for example, a gym that has about 3,000 members. There's things like hydrotherapy pools, there's conference facilities, there's cafes, there's medical facilities and allied health professionals, and it'd be great to attract more allied health professionals to our city. So this is something that could potentially be a monumental benefit to our city, and I believe if we do anything other than accepting the option that while it's unfortunate it takes some of the Rosny Parklands, there is a huge amount of that to spare, and all of the options have positive and negatives associated with them. But I believe that we will only be able to secure this centre if we go with that option. So I support the
Thank you. I note that we have a technical problem. We've got an opportunity to filibuster a moment ago. So what we'll do, if either Councillor Jones or Councillor Mould would like to make a contribution, at the 4-minute mark there'll be a ding, and then at 5, so old school. So Councillor James, if you'd like to make your contribution, please.
Yes, look, it's very interesting listening to colleagues in relation to this, and may I say from the outset that John Hepper circulated a email to us all, I believe, and John made a comment. The City Heart Plan is an exemplary project that brought together the skills, ideas and passion of council staff, multi-skilled consultants, local businesses and the wider community. It provides a clear and exciting vision for the City Heart. In my view, it's alarming and disappointing to see the Clarence Council cast aside the most desired outcomes expressed in the City Heart and subsequently put the Rosny Parklands at risk. Now, the City of Hobart had the courage to deflect the AFL proposal away from being placed on the Queen's Domain and Cornelian Bay, areas where past master plans and consultations have been prepared with the community and demonstrate the important values and strong community passion for those locations. Similarly, the Kingborough Council had the foresight to direct its investigations to the Kingborough Sports Precinct, where extensive master planning for future sport and recreation uses have been undertaken in past years. There are other locations within Clarence, and they obviously would be better suited for such facilities without degrading the long-term vision of the City Heart. Now, the City Heart, we had extensive consultation, and it cost this council about $400,000+. And it went out, and in early September we had them on track, and then out of the blue we had an approach from DSG, Department of State Growth, to drop this onto them and therefore basically put the City Heart project on hold. Now, how do you think those persons, all those people that had been involved in that consultation, had been basically let down because they were of the view that a decision would be made by council in that regard? And they haven't been advised, other than what's in the media, about what now has come on board. Now, the Rosny Parklands is a pristine area of public open space that must be protected, and it must be kept in that form for future generations. You can say you're only using a small part of that area for this thing, but you're going to have the actual removal of large trees. You've got all sorts of problems with the landscape. You have to actually get in and use considerable earthworks to flatten it and put in the necessary infrastructure and playing surfaces required. This particular motion is desecrating and destroying a unique area of our parklands, and by the very nature of either the option C or B, it doesn't make any difference, because that particular motion is having an oval, either a primary one on the parklands or a secondary one on Charles Hand, or vice versa. Now, the other point that I want to make here is there are other locations within Clarence, and there was a lot of discussion about Gilston Bay, and that was within the mix, and therefore it was a potential discussion point in relation to having that developed out there. And that would have helped and basically consolidated the community by having that particular development out there, where a lot of the haves and the have-nots would be on an equal par, whereas having it here in the parklands, it would basically destroy and it'd become an elite sort of area where, even though there is an open access to that particular building and infrastructure, it doesn't necessarily mean that it is still public open space and people to be thing. This motion I will not support. It's moving away from the City Heart project, and from all intents and purposes, it will destroy a natural area of pristine public open space, which I believe should be kept for future generations.
Councillor
to enjoy.
Moore, please.
When I spoke to this at the time we went to community consultation, I did say that I wasn't overly impressed with the site, but really we should refer it to the community to have a say. And we did that, and 1,000 people in various guises responded. And it was really interesting to note that, you know, I think I might have made a comment to the CEO when we were discussing this at some stage, and I said, before the reports were finalised, and I said, well, we sent it out to the people to ask them. I think we've got a duty to actually listen. And the amazing thing is that although I didn't think that the whole thing should be located on the Rosny Parklands, I noticed that 67% of the respondents, and for that read about 670 people, right, they said you know, that they were in favour of it being wholly located on the Rosny Parklands and Rosny Golf site. So I've listened, and that's what they say, even though I don't think that that's such a good idea. Then, to the credit of, you know, of the negotiations and the officers thing, we've actually persuaded the AFL that that's not, or the State Department of State Growth, who are the proponents, by the way, not the AFL, but who are the proponents, that, you know, that we would go with what the community was split 50-50 on, which was that it should be across the two parks. So here we have a proposal which is a compromise, and as we heard tonight from this Department of State Growth, who's on this particular committee that's going to make recommendations, that they're actually going to go with the negotiated solution, which minimises the impacts on the park. Now, I mean, Councillor James mentions pristine parklands. No, they're not. It's an old golf course. There's an entire unit, there's an entire aged care facility and retirement village on the other side, which was the other 9 holes of the original golf course, and there wasn't too much fuss about when we turned that into total dwellings, and actually destroyed 50% of it. And there's a possibility now, this parklands, yes, it does contain many mature old gum trees, but a lot of the large trees are actually pines, which really need to be removed if you're going to have anything resembling parklands. And those gum trees, and I don't know how many of you have walked down Rosneal Road, but every year or two, every time there's a windy storm, one of those gum trees is going to drop a widowmaker onto a fence and onto a path, and it's only a matter of time before someone gets seriously injured. So there's a need in that park because the species chosen are the limb-dropping type. So the species this is an opportunity to redevelop that parkland. And we talk about shade and we talk about heat sinks and all those sorts of things, right? Well, gum trees aren't good shade trees. Blackwoods are. And you can actually get underneath them and have your picnic tables. There's an opportunity here to use some of this massive investment in our community to actually redevelop the remnant parkland into a truly iconic, modern and acceptable area for recreation. Now, I walk through there at least once a week. And maybe it's just the time of day that I'm walking there, but apart from an odd kid or two taking a shortcut to Rosny College, I don't see people in there because there's plenty of other parklands. I mean, next door to a rain is all that walkable space. Now, we haven't done very much with that, but that is a truly walkable suburb, and that is something that we could develop, and that is something we could connect to that park, and we could have the things we talk about, streetscapes, round one, and so things. So I'll be supporting this, and it's quite clear tonight, Kingston is not in the hunt unless we flick it to them.
Thank you, Councillor Moulton. Before I call on Councillor Ritchie for a right of reply, I'm going to enter the debate. Colleagues, tonight we have the opportunity to make a game-changing decision for our city. When we consider our position, I urge you to reflect on the extensive community consultation Council has conducted. 68% of Clarence residents who engaged in the consultation want to see the AFL High Performance Centre in our city. Simply put, this will deliver social and economic benefits to the City of Clarence like we have never seen before. Together with cricket programs at Blunston Arena, an AFL High Performance Centre in Rosny will see Clarence be the home of elite sport in Tasmania. Colleagues, tonight we have the ideal opportunity to clearly demonstrate that as a city we have truly come of age. We will have Tasmania's elite sporting talent in and around the heart of our city, inspiring our next generation, engaging with our youth, our schools and the wider community. Not putting too fine a point on it, the potential flow-on social and economic benefits for the immediate area for our schools and our businesses is huge. This is a $70 million investment in our city. From my perspective, we have a moral obligation to firmly seize opportunities like this with both hands. Let's get it done. Let us be the council that truly listens to their community and, most importantly, delivers for their community. Colleagues, I urge you all to support this motion to deliver an AFL High Performance Centre in the City of Clarence. And with that, I'll ask the mover to deliver her right of reply, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I'd like to thank all colleagues for their contributions, and it's my firm view that every one of us has come along here tonight with courage, with decency, and prepared to put forward their personal views in a respectful way and have that reciprocated around the room this evening. And I think, as Councillor Warren rightly said, you will inevitably have individuals seeing a space differently. I think that's quite a natural thing to occur. That's certainly what we've seen this evening, and that's not something that wasn't expected from my perspective, and it's for that very reason. People see spaces differently. What some of us might see is a wonderful opportunity for future generations to connect in a whole range of ways. For some others, that's not necessarily what they see, and I fully respect that. And so I don't intend to actually go round and argue the merits of where people have landed and why, because they keep their own counsel on those things. In relation to the survey results, I think the point's been well made that it was a decent sample. And indeed, if we dismissed it out of hand, I think it's the second largest sample, in fact, that we've ever had in the history of the surveys that we've been doing. So we've probably made a lot of decisions on a lot less that people have been comfortable with. So in terms of it being considered a minuscule amount, I actually don't think that's quite a fair assessment of what's gone on. The other point I wanted to talk about was the timing. State government, obviously, as we heard earlier this evening in the representation, did say they appreciated that it has been a little bit quicker than they might have anticipated. But I think at the end of the day, difficult decisions don't get any easier by putting them off. So for me, I don't think it would have mattered. I would have landed where I landed regardless. So I appreciate the contributions and thank councillors for their support.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Colleagues, I'll put the motion, which is a recommendation. All those in favour? Those against? So carried. Thank you, colleagues. Moving now on to item 9. There are no motions on notice. Item 10, moving to 10.3, answers to questions without notice, previous council meeting, as listed in the agenda. 10.4, questions without notice. Are there any questions from the floor, starting this evening with the Deputy Mayor? Councillor Ritchie.
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Mulder. Councillor Hunter. Councillor Hume.
Thank you, Mayor. One question. May I have your and colleagues' indulgence for a moment of silence for a Belrive resident who made an enormous contribution to Tasmania, the Honourable Frances Mary Bladell.
May I, before I ask colleagues to stand, may I just, as you'd be aware, the Honourable Fran Bladell was a member for Franklin from 1986 through to 2002. She served as a minister in the field government and was also Secretary to Cabinet under Jim Bacon in that first year of his, first term of his government. So please stand for a moment's silence for the Honourable Fran Bladell. Thank you, colleagues, and thank you, Councillor Hume. Councillor James, any questions from you?
Yes, thank you. At the last meeting, I was advised that what Council's cash reserves are at the 30th of June 2024. In that answer, it referred to, amongst other things, 58.1 million was subject to restrictions for employee provisions, but not limited to infrastructure renewal. 45.074 million is therefore considered unrestricted at that time. So my question through you to the actual
question to me, please, Councillor James.
Yeah, the Chief Financial Officer, is that 45 million, could that be directed to any particular project that may come up and may need to be directed towards a major project within the city as part of a major redevelopment of the space?
Thank you, Councillor James. Mrs. Munro.
Through you, Mayor, that money is actually all allocated to the existing projects in our capital and also our operational budgets. So if you wanted to move any money, that would be a matter for council.
Thank you. Councillor James?
The second question is, and perhaps the Chief Financial Officer can answer this for me as well. On our rates notice, there is a reference to the Tasmanian Collection Service, and I think the word may or is to be contacted should a ratepayer fail to meet his or her obligations to pay the rates on time. Is that possible for some of that wording to be changed so that it may not necessarily frighten the ratepayers, because it seems as though that the very wording of that does imply that Tasmanian Collection Service will as a matter of course, collect unpaid rates.
Thank you, Councillor James. As you will know, the questions come to me. I determine where they go. We'll take that one on notice. We'll come back to you. Thank you very much. Councillor Walker, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you. I note that you mentioned earlier reading out some correspondence in relation to the upgrades at the Percy Street area. There seems to have been, I've had feedback from some Bellerive residents that the state of the road immediately leading up to that area is quite degraded with potholes on the Clarence Street side. I guess my question is, would it be the engineering department's plan to deal with those once all the roadworks are largely completed and the use of heavy trucks are finished?
Thank you. I was there actually earlier this afternoon, so I know exactly what you're talking about. Mr Graham, would you like to...
I'll take that on notice to get feedback from my team as to when we're planning any other resurfacing works.
Yeah, thank you. Second question.
Yes, thank you. I didn't get to it when we had the quarterly report at the last meeting, but page 41 mentioned the a delay in the drinking fountain that's proposed for the park off to Bomford's Lane. You'll know that there's two, if you like, shelters and barbecues there. They're incredibly popular at this time of the year. So my first point on that is, can we have a timeline of when we can expect that? And my second question is, given the absence of this fountain, families are now having to go to use the hand basin associated with the toilet to get water. I brought some in, and I'm wondering if any people would like to partake in that water, or would they actually, or can we look at actually prioritising this drinking fountain, please?
So, Mr Graham, two questions. Would you like to have a glass of water?
On the first one, I'll take that on notice, and the second one, I'll decline just for now. Yeah, I'll need to find out from my team on the timing of that project.
Thank you, Mr Graham. Councillor Goyne. Thank you. Councillor Darko. Councillor Warren. Councillor Chong. Councillor Kennedy. Right. Well, we've now arrived at item 11, and I call for a motion to move into closed meeting, please. Move Councillor Goyne, seconded Councillor Chong. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? That's carried. Well, thank you to those members of the public who attended in person this evening, and also to those joining us at home via the live stream. On behalf of Council, may I take this opportunity to wish you and your loved ones a wonderful Christmas and every success for the coming year. Please take care of yourselves and each other, and we look forward to seeing you back here, same time, same place, on the 15th of January for our first meeting for 2024. Please end the live stream.